Welcome everyone to Haven of Horror. I've got Torgo. We've got Robert back with us finally. He's missed a couple weeks of across the 600 things that we're doing right now. Um, but we're here to
Very
do
busy
something
right now.
very different than we normally do. We're here to talk.
But yeah,
For anyone who hasn't figured it out from the thumbnail or title, we're talking about The Haunting of Hill House, not to be confused with the Haunting or whatever. What's the book called?
The
The
book is
Haunting
The
of Hill
Haunting of
House.
Hill House.
Okay, the book is
Yeah.
okay. Because for some
And,
reason I thought it was like like the show was backwards in the title.
okay. Yeah, both movies are just called The Haunting.
So weird.
Yeah.
We'll
I don't
get
know
to
why
those
they did that.
eventually. So this was you guys' just first viewing, both of you, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So before we get into the meat of it, I'd just like to get general reactions. We'll start with Noah. How did you feel going through this since it was your first time?
Yeah, going through this, I really enjoyed it. I heard about this when it first came out, and it always looked pretty interesting, but it was never like top of my priority. So I just kind of forgot about it, but I always heard good things about it. And then I saw that the director did other stuff. The following year, obviously, he did Doctor Sleep, which I watched and I loved in the theater. And so now I finally have an excuse to watch it. And as I was watching it, I completely fell in love with it. I love the show. I think it's really well written. It's a great example of, we can get into like the meat of it later, but it's a great example of a horror story that's not really about the ghosts or anything. It is about the characters and their trauma. And we'll reference the trauma meme, I'm pretty sure. Um, but yeah, it's maybe the strongest example in from what I've seen of Flanagan's work in characters and just being a character study. It probably has the strongest characters out of everything that I've seen from his filmography. Um, and that is really his strongest aspect across all of his work, is just he really knows how to do stories about characters rather than just getting caught up in all the nonsense and jump scares and that stuff. But no, I mean, initial thoughts. I really dug this show. I loved it. I see the hype.
Yeah, it's beautiful, but yet also just like, oh, this is so sad.
It's maybe I found it a lot more sad than I did scary. There's some disturbing moments here and there, but it's more so just tragic. Well, a little bittersweet, but it's like a sad drama more so than it is a horror movie to me.
Mhm.
Robert, I know you were more interested in Midnight Mass than this. Are you glad we did this first, or are you like, can we just get to Midnight Mass now?
I think I'm glad we did this first. Now I'm just kind of ready to dive in to more of Flanagan's work. I thought this was great. I really enjoyed watching it. I've heard good things for years and years. It's on my list, and now I've seen it, and I didn't want it to end. The best compliment I can give this
Yeah.
show. It's funny because it's a show with a lot of very unlikable, flawed characters, but I love spending time with them. If that makes any sense. I mean, we might get into
Mhm.
it later, but there wasn't anyone that I personally found annoying or like dragging the show down. Like, oh, like let's get like all these characters. Some are more flawed than others, but I just really enjoyed spending time with this family. And I'm sad that it's over. I'm glad it's over. I don't want a season two, but I'm already anxious to rewatch it and to watch more of Flanagan's work. Yeah, totally lived up to the hype for me for the most part. I thought this was really solid, and like you guys said, like it's very sad. It's more sad than it is
Yeah.
scary. But Flanagan's one of the few filmmakers who knows how to get under my skin. At least for me personally, like a lot of the show I found very unsettling and creepy. This is not a show I enjoy watching before bed. Which I
Yeah.
don't have with a lot of scary stuff anymore. You know, like we always talk about, like slasher movies. I don't find scary. I just find them entertaining. Like
Mhm.
Flanagan's one of the few filmmakers who knows like how to get in my head. There's a lot of
Mhm.
existential horror in this show, and that's the stuff that really gets to me. But
Yeah.
as a family drama, I thought it was really good. We recently reviewed Oculus, and it's very similar to that, where it's about trauma. It's a story that spans decades. It's not linear. We're jumping back and forth in time. It's like everything that works in Oculus just stretched out to 10 episodes in the best way possible. Like we said with Oculus, the characters are good, like they're functional for a 2 hour movie, but these characters are so much more fleshed out and you know so much more about them. Like it's a great character study. So yeah, I had a great time with it.
So I saw Oculus after this, much like I guess
Mm.
at this point you two did as well. No, it'd be backwards.
No, I
Sorry.
saw this
Yeah.
after.
Yeah,
Saw
he's
Oculus before. Yeah.
and it was crazy to me that how much Oculus feels like a prototype for this show, and everything that you may have complained about with Oculus is not a problem here. He fixed it.
Yep.
Yeah.
In anyone else's hands, I will say the one sister that runs the funeral home, I think would be insufferable. But with Flanagan, he makes sure you understand how she got there, and he never pushes it to that point of like, I don't want to see this person on screen anymore.
Yeah, well, and I think, like you said, if this were a lesser show, that character would be a lot more insufferable. And, if I was dealing with her in real life, I don't think I would like her. But I much like Robert said, I don't dislike really any of the characters. I see where they're all coming from, and I think they're all really well drawn. And that's Shirley we were just talking about. Flanagan does
Thank
a
you.
good
I'm
job of
terrible with names.
yeah. Flanagan does a good job of fleshing her out, but she's also really well performed by both the adult actress and the kid actress. And we can get into it later, but I think pretty much all the actors in the show give really good performances, and I was really impressed with most of the kid actors too. I don't think there's really a weak link in there that I can think of off the top of my head. Um, but no, yeah.
Okay.
Well, since,
Oh,
oh,
go ahead.
well, since you mentioned Shirley, I do want to spotlight real quick. Young Shirley was played by Lulu Wilson, and older Shirley was played by Elizabeth Reeser. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing either of those names, but I think all the casting's very good. Everyone's good. It's really hard. One thing that's interesting about the show, like in Oculus, is that you get like kid versions of these characters and adult versions. And I think Shirley, more than any of them, I was extremely impressed with how well those two actresses synced up to me, like in terms of
Yeah.
appearance, expressions, performances. Like I think of all the kids to adults, Shirley's the best match, where it's like I just believe that's
Yeah.
that character 26 years later.
Yeah.
They're all good, but I think those two sync up the best, where I'm like, wow, like they matched up so perfectly for me. I was very impressed with that.
The one that kind of threw me off a little bit just because of how different they look and act is Luke. Like,
Sure. But
yeah,
that's also easier for me to roll with since he's like
'cause
6.
yeah, no,
So
he's a really little kid, so it's understandable. But it's just funny, like seeing how you see him as a little kid at first, and then you see how he is now. It's like, oh my god, what happened to
Did,
this kid?
did you guys think it was a weird choice that they didn't give older Luke glasses and that they never explained that? Like, does he
Yeah,
just not wear them anymore? Did he get eye surgery? Like,
that
it's like a tiny nitpick. It's not a big deal. I was just curious if that stood out to you guys.
no, that was something I thought about, but I didn't really think about it until like halfway through the series. I was just kind of like, oh yeah, he doesn't wear glasses anymore. That's weird. But
Yeah.
it did. It's maybe a little nitpicky. It didn't bother me too much,
Mm.
but like I said, I didn't notice it at first. So
Yeah, it's not a big deal.
right,
I also want to point out, since we're talking about kid actors, McKenna Grace is Theo.
Yes.
Yep.
If you don't know, she is from the new Ghostbusters films. That went right over my head. I didn't recognize her. I don't know what it was.
yeah.
So I guess before we get into the meat of it, we'll just do one last bit of preamble. Favorite character and least favorite character. Robert, go.
Ooh, that's so tough. I like all of them. Like Theo's probably the most likable in that she's like the most adjusted. Like she's still dealing
Is
with
she?
stuff. Yeah, in comparison
I
to the other siblings. Although you guys may
yeah,
disagree.
she's got her own problems.
Yeah, but her subplot's really cool. I mean, Luke, I think, is the most tragic and therefore the most sympathetic. So I like them a lot. I like the father. Least favorite's probably Shirley, but that's not like saying she's a bad character. It's just you like the other ones more. And Steven. I think Steven's fine. He's just not as compelling to me as some of the others. But like he totally works.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can't give a hard like favorite, least favorite, but
See, I think
very
Steven might be my second favorite. I
nice.
really like the
Oh, interesting.
I like the whole like arc of him being in denial because he was asleep through it.
Mhm.
Well, interestingly enough, I think Steven might honestly be my least favorite. I still
Oh,
really like him. I like all the characters, but I thought Steven was just kind of an asshole the whole time. Especially like, at the beginning, how you first, even when you're first introduced to him, you just get the sense that like, oh yeah, this guy doesn't really believe anything that he writes, but he just does it for money. So it's like, okay, well, he's kind of a dick, but he was still really well written and well acted. Um, I'd say maybe my favorite's probably Theo, and then second favorite's Luke. Uh, but I don't know. I don't really know how to rank them. I appreciate them all.
yeah,
Well, and
no, for sure.
when I say I think Theo's the most adjusted of the kids, that's not me saying that she doesn't make mistakes with the show because she absolutely
No, she
does. But
absolutely, yeah.
compared to stuff we learn later about Shirley and Steven and mistakes they've made, I'm in comparison to them, I'm like, Theo's mostly got her stuff together. She's not as
Yeah.
haunted by personal demons or mistakes the way some of the other siblings are. But yeah, she's got a career that's going well. But yeah, she obviously has her own problems as they all do. Show
Right.
about Trub.
I'd say my favorite is Theo as well. And I think I told Noah this, but if Robert, if you're not aware, if anyone who's not watching is aware, that is Mike Flanagan's wife.
Yes.
You will see her a lot in the next few things that we do. Because
She's already popped up in Oculus.
she popped up in Oculus. I don't remember if she's in Gerald's Game, but she's in Midnight Mass. And the Fall of House Usher, but we're not doing that one right away.
Well, and I have seen her in Hush, but that was several years ago, so I wouldn't recognize it from memory, and we can't watch that movie right. So.
All right, so episode 1 starts. I lost it. Hold on. Episode 1 starts with Steven. Obviously, he's known for writing a book, The Haunting of Hill House, which I think is a cool way to bring in the fact that this is an adaptation of a book. And I'd be very curious. I would love to see like that version of the book printed to see what his like Hill House looks like. There's an opening monologue. Did you guys get annoyed at all the monologues?
Not for most
Nope.
of it.
Yes.
Wait, not for most of it.
We'll get to it.
We'll get to
it. And it flashes back and forth between the current timeline, which is him kind of separated on his own. He's selling his book, and he gets a call from his sister. Flashback to them as kids, and they're living in this house, but temporarily the idea is to flip it for money. And I don't remember if they mentioned in this episode, but they'll mention it later, that it's going to get them rich. And we kind of check in with each sibling and like how they're doing at the beginning, right at this specific moment, years after something happened, but we don't know what happened yet. Did this hook you guys right away? Because it took me 2 tries to get into the show, and even then, it took me a couple episodes to fall in love with the show. But I haven't had that on rewatches. Like when I've rewatched it, knowing what's gonna happen, I'm like, oh, okay, I see where we're going now.
No, I honestly was hooked right away, which is interesting because, based off that description and like how the show kind of is, it doesn't sound like it has that big of a hook. It is kind of a slow burn at first, but I don't know. I'm usually into like slow burn TV and film, so I don't know. It just kind of, I was still like intrigued by it, but you don't really get like a hook moment until I guess near the end where they have the reveal that or right at the end where they have the reveal about Nell. Um, but I don't know. I was still drawn into it.
So before we get to the ending, which Noah just spoiled, no.
People,
One of the things that they're
they've
setting up,
seen this.
one of the things that they're setting up throughout the episode is Steven keeps getting a call from someone, his sister Nell. But he doesn't answer it. I can't remember now. It's been a few days since I watched the first episode. Is it that he doesn't answer, or he just can't hear anything when he answers it? I think at first he's ignoring it.
He
First,
doesn't.
he definitely ignores it.
Him and Shirley both ignore it.
Okay, yeah. So the two of them get a call from their sister. Theo meets a woman at a club, takes her home, and that's where we are introduced to her first major flaw, which is intimacy issues. She has sex with a woman, and it's like, bye, get out.
One night stand. Yeah.
In the most awkward way possible. It's just like, yeah, I have to go to bed, so you need to get out.
Goodbye. Please leave.
And then we get what Noah called the hook. Steven comes home, and he finds Nell in the corner, just kind of sitting there. And I don't know did you guys feel like something was wrong with just the way it was set up, or did you not see it coming?
I didn't really see it coming at first. Yeah, I was kind of surprised that the twist was that she was dead. Like I wasn't really expecting that. But we should also mention too that we're introduced to Luke briefly, who's we see is an addict and struggling with that. So we have a brief introduction to all the characters, but it's mostly focused on Steven for the first episode. Interestingly enough, though, I think pretty much every character except for Steven has their own dedicated episode, because even in this one, he's kind of the main character, but it's also an ensemble with everyone else.
I feel like he is the smart one to go with the eyes in character because he is the one that doesn't believe.
Yeah, he's the most seemingly rational one.
So he's the one that pulls the viewer in, and then this insanity is happening around him, but you're experiencing it from his point of view as he continuously, desperately tries to convince himself that it's not real. It's their family is sick.
Yeah, they're mentally ill.
Which is a metaphor for the show if you didn't catch it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, in terms of him getting his own episode, that's kind of split between the first one and the finale, and we'll get there later. But it sort of bookends with Steven as our main character, and then in the middle we get everyone else's POVs. But no, this hooked me pretty quickly. I think I was just in the right mood for it. I got into it, and I didn't see the ending coming, but I also didn't know it was the end of the episode yet. I was just that invested. If I had any gripes with this episode, it's probably just that it took me a second to figure out who Thea was. I probably won't have this problem on rewatch, but she's the one we see the least as a kid for the first couple episodes. So when we're introduced to adult Theo, I was like, okay, is she Shirley's friend? I didn't immediately realize that she's one of the siblings. But that could just be a me thing. I doubt this will be a problem on rewatch. I just was like, wait, I don't remember who is this.
I was gonna say, I mean, they didn't have any friends; they just moved in.
But it was just on first viewing.
Process of elimination, Robert. Process of elimination. No, the other thing we need to mention is this.
No. I meant in the present, with them as adults.
I thought you meant in the flashback.
No, because I'm pretty sure the only time we see Kid Theo in the first episode would be when the dad's putting them all in the car. That's probably the only time we see Theo as a child.
No, that's a lot more fair. I thought you meant the flashback. That's my bad. No. The other big thing that this episode sets up is the red door. Mm-hmm. And that is the most Stephen King thing in this show. A red door with something creepy behind it, but you're not sure what. I've often said that Mike Flanagan is kind of the cinematic Stephen King. They have very similar methods of storytelling, which is the horror comes from making you care about these characters and taking everyday ideas and making them creepy. You know, like, oh, what if the hotel was haunted, or what if the bullied girl had powers and was a monster, you know, etc. Let's see. So that's kind of the first episode, just, you know, moving all these pieces to get to the meat of the story. And I think we're going to be saying that a lot because the first, you know, 4 episodes are just like character episodes, and we're not really progressing much in the main timeline. But I don't care because it's all so good.
Yeah. No, I just really like all these characters. And even I guess we can move on to the second episode, which is the Shirley episode.
I do want to say before we move
Um,
on though that final shot when you hear the dad say she's dead and then Nell's just standing in the corner, that is creepy as shit.
Yep.
Yeah. that is really creepy.
Yes,
yeah.
the episode 2, open casket. Oh god,
Yeah.
this one made me cringe in many ways.
This is one of the heaviest episodes. Like, even though Luke's episode is probably more tragic, I don't know. This is like the one I'm least looking forward to rewatching.
Mhm.
This is the one that kind of most deals with one of the central themes of the whole show, which is death. And Shirley's whole like perception of it and response to it. This is the one where we're in the flashbacks, we see that she finds these kittens that their mother is gone, so she starts taking care of them, and then by the end of that whole thing, they end up dead, and she's traumatized by that. And then later you cut to when the mom, Olivia, is dead. By the way, she's also one of my favorite characters. I should have mentioned her when we were talking about characters.
We can
Actress
talk
that
more
plays
about
her
her
is-
in episode. What is it? Episode 9. That's her episode.
Yes.
Yeah, that's her episode. Actress is fantastic. She's really good. Um, so at her funeral, she sees how I guess it's the embalmer or whatever that does the that like fixes up the body for the funeral. She sees that, and then that kind of sets her on that career path as an adult. So it's an interesting character arc, and interesting how it kind of fits into the overall theme of how each character processes death.
Yeah. The most unnerving shot in this episode is that cat with the fly in its mouth.
Ugh.
Yeah.
So sad.
It's not even that it's sad. Like I'm not affected by like animal death on screen. I know it's not really dead, or it's not a real cat, but just something about the way it's like moving is very disconcerting.
Mm.
And if I was her, I'd need therapy for like the next 10 years. I mean, to be fair, all of these characters need therapy, like in the strongest
Desperately.
sense. But yeah, no, I like that we kind of set up a tragedy and she turns it into a positive, where she's, you know, become a funeral business owner, who and rents, you know, a house to Theo, who is now a child therapist, which I think is funny. Like, her of all people is a therapist.
Yeah.
I don't know, Theo. Yeah, I don't know if you picked the right
You got some
right job
issues
there.
yourself.
Well, as we see, she has very useful skills
Right.
when it comes to the
Yes.
well-being of children.
Well, I mean, So I was gonna bring this up more in episode 9, but parts of this are just The Shining. Her power is
Yes.
just The Shining, except it requires touch.
With she needs to use her hands.
Well, any similarities, though, you can kind of trace back to the original book. I think Stephen King has said on record that the book, The Haunting of Hill House, was a big influence on him. And so, like, any correlations you see, I'm sure, like, are because of that.
I've
that
read
makes
the
a lot
first
of
100 or so pages, and she didn't have that ability in the book that I noticed.
Yeah, I don't know if that comes up in the book, but that she is, like, supposed to be, like, psychic in the
Well, that's why they
movie.
invite her to the house in the book, yeah.
For
But I
this,
just mean
guess
the
they add
specific way that it's...
the hand
like
Yeah.
written
touch.
and played is the very Shining-esque.
Right.
And it's more than just her power,
Yeah.
but I'm saving the rest of it for episode 9.
Well, and this episode is also where they establish Olivia's like migraines, and I think
Yes.
and later we learn. I think that's in the Theo episode. We learned that she also has psychic powers, and that's how. Weirdly enough, I think it's only like the girls that have that connection. I don't know if it's hinted at for any of the male siblings, but
Luke
it really.
has a form of it because they have the twin.
Oh yeah,
bond.
they have the twin thing,
but
right.
his is more limited in that it only works with Nell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think even with that, when we establish that, you know, maybe the mom also has some kind of gift, Theo is way more sensitive.
He's probably the most powerful out of all.
Is it this episode or the next episode where the mom like feels a cold spot, and then like Theo says the entire house is freezing?
I think that's the next episode because
that's probably episode 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, before we move on from the cats, though, we should say like that's kind of some of our earliest like heavy symbolism in the show. Is Olivia has that line about the dead kittens that they weren't going to survive without their mother, and then the question throughout the rest of the show is: are our characters going to survive without their mother? And it's like
the answer for some of them is no.
Yep.
Unfortunately,
the first of many heavy tragic symbolism moments in the series.
The other main thing I want to bring up is I think this episode also has some of the actress that plays Shirley's finest acting.
Yeah.
The scene where Steven calls her to let her know that Nell is dead. Everyone should watch, even if you don't want to watch this show, just watch that scene. It is a masterclass in acting. I'm pretty sure she goes through like all 5 stages in like 2 minutes.
Yeah, because she's immediately at denial, and then I guess acceptance by the end.
Grief, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there was anything else. Oh, we also get, unless I mislabeled my notes because I lost track at some points, like I was just wrapped up in the show. This is also where we get the first kind of sign of how long this has been going on for Luke, where he gets kicked out of his own sister's wedding. Is that this episode?
I think so.
It doesn't say anything about it.
Yeah.
I pulled up the episode list just so that I could remember like where we're at. Just because, like I said, it's been about a week since I watched the first 3 or 4 episodes. Did you have anything else? Did we have anything else we want to bring up about episode 2? Anything that you liked? Anything that stood out to you?
So I think it's this episode where Cheryl starts working on Nell's body, and earlier I talked about how I do view this more. I guess I view this more as a character drama, or at least that's what I appreciated more about the show. But there are scenes that disturb me, and one of them was just kind of the long, like, in-depth process of her working on the body. It's like there's no like jump scares or anything. It's just like this process, and it's just there's something just like disturbing to watch about it. I don't really know what it is. But other than that, no, I mean it's a good episode.
No, it's great.
This is an episode.
We do have the one jump scare where she encounters her mom's ghost.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there are a few jump scares in the show, but that didn't. That was just like a scene that just focused on this one disturbing thing, which is what I found unsettling about it.
Well, and this is one of the episodes early on that really just cements what this whole series is about. It's a show about a family dealing with a suicide. Sorry, YouTube. I know YouTube doesn't like that word.
Unalive.
It's what
they unalived themselves, Robert.
That's what that. But it's not just a show about that. It's a show about a family dealing with that, which is something many of us can relate to in some capacity, and it's really heavy. And I feel I wouldn't judge or blame anyone if they got 2 episodes in and were like, "Yeah, the show isn't for me. It's too heavy." Like, I get it. Like, this is not for everybody.
I can
No.
see
it's
this.
really heavy stuff, but that's what the show is.
I can see it striking a chord too hard for some people.
Hmm.
Yeah, which is understandable, but
And
yeah,
so the next episode is Theo's episode, which is
Mhm.
not to beat a dead horse, but another heavy episode.
Mhm.
yeah,
So this one really goes into Theo being able to perceive feelings for people and impressions from objects when she touches them with her bare hands. So that is the way you can always tell which one's Theo. If you're like me and can't tell the kids apart sometimes, it's the one wearing gloves or a sweater or something that blocks her hands. And so there's kind of two things going on. Is in the future you have Theo, or I guess not in the future, but in the current timeline,
present.
Theo is talking to one of her patients and trying to figure out what's causing her to act out, um, and is what something is wrong with her, and even Theo can tell. In the flashback, Luke encounters a ghost, and no one will believe him. So Theo decides that she's going to help him, and I really like this because you're going to see later that everyone is at that point where like they've written Luke out off, except Nell, and so it makes it even more sadder. It's like they were all like this close, at one point, and then it just all fell apart.
Yeah, it was kind of sad to see um, in the future, or not the future, but yeah, the present, how everyone was just kind of like, Luke, he's just a junkie. It's like no one had any faith in him. It was kind of sad to see that.
To be fair, it wasn't a lack of faith. It was that they had done this song and dance over and over and over. And
yeah, I guess my thing with that is we hadn't seen any of that, so I don't know. It was, but I do get it. It's like, and I think they do say that he's like stolen from them before. Well, and even at the beginning in the first episode, like he was about to steal Steven's iPad. So I get it, but
I'm
the
so
show did a
glad you
lot of
mentioned that. Sorry, I just it sprung on. I'm so glad you mentioned that because one of the other things that the show does that I love is it will present you with a scene, like Steven stealing the iPad, or not Steven, Luke stealing the iPad, and then they'll just forget about it for a while, and you're like, oh, are they gonna do anything like that? Well, like, what was the context of that? And then you get like, and 6 episodes later, and it's like, oh, here's that scene, and here's what actually was happening. And it's like, oh, it rewards you for watching, and not a lot of things do that anymore.
Yeah. Well, no, that's why I love a lot of TV that's structured like this, where it's like non-linear and focused on a bunch of different characters, because then you get to see different scenes from different perspectives, and it's recontextualized later. Yeah, so that's one of the things. I mean, that's probably one of the things that hooked me even from episode 1. That's why I didn't really have any problems getting into the show from the beginning.
Yeah,
Wake up, Robert.
Because we, the audience, get the context that the characters have, like from their point of view. Like when we have been told, "Oh, Luke's a junkie now," and then we're seeing through Steven's eyes, Luke looking very disheveled and cold and like twitching and stealing his stuff. So we, like Steven, are like, "Oh, he's relapsing," and then you get the full context to that later without the show cheating. Because there's a reason why Luke looks and is acting the way he is. It's not just the show messing with you, which I really respect. It is really well done, the way they play with different perspectives and information.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. Anyway, sorry. No, you unlocked that memory, and I didn't want to lose it.
Yeah, no problem.
What
but back to the Theo episode. What scene did we talk about yet?
We were talking about, well, all we really did was just kind of go over what the two timelines in this episode were. We haven't really gone into any of them yet.
Well, I think it's this episode that is a really crucial scene where we see Theo dancing in one of the rooms in the house, like watching a TV, and then you hear someone knocking at the door trying to get in, and it's a really creepy moment. And you, the audience, saying, "Oh, it's just a creepy ghost." And then, boy, does the context of that change later.
Way later.
I think that was episode 3. I could be wrong. But yeah, that's great.
That's episode 3, yeah.
Yeah. and then we get Theo's side story this episode with this little girl she's trying to help out and figure out what's going on. Because we get both, and one thing that
Right.
both episode 2 and 3 have is episode 2 it's Shirley and episode 3 it's Theo, both interacting with a kid who is like seeing this scary monster, or in the case of the kid with Shirley, like a creepy image of his grandma. And it's completely ambiguous if they're seeing literal ghosts and monsters, or if it's like, well, the kid's just going through stuff. Like that's ambiguous. And then with Theo, you're trying to figure out, like with this girl, what's going on, and she does, and it's really messed up and sad.
It's
when
horrifying.
you
Really
figure
messed
out what's
up.
going on that one.
So,
Yep.
I'm sorry. It wasn't that the kid is acting out. It's that she's made this imaginary friend, Mr. Smiley, which sounds like a Sony horror film, or like really shitty.
It's like a Blumhouse movie.
Yeah,
Mr.
but it
Smiley.
works in the context of this because it is just a kid like creating something to hide that abuse.
Compartmentalize it.
And I like that we're able to kind of go there, and it's developing Theo's character because she had to feel that to find out what was happening. And I think it also kind of goes into like her own complicated feelings about her father, because one thing I don't think we get there, we're not there yet, we'll find out later, it's all of them are kind of estranged from the dad after the events at the house. And then we find out that at the last night in Hill House, when Hugh grabs Theo as they were trying to flee, Theo saw the ghost push her mom, which we're at that time we assume is to her death or something similar.
Well, and that's a question I want to ask you guys, if it's a criticism or not. Do you think we get enough from Theo? Because obviously she believes in this psychic ability she has. Do you think we have enough debate with her and the other kids of like, does Theo believe in ghosts, or is she still in denial about that for some reason? Do you think we get enough of that conflict in terms of like what her interpretation of what happened was? Do you think we could have had her discuss that more with the other characters?
Yes and no. Not to give a cop-out answer. I think that the answer, the conversation that she has with Nell later on is enough. Or not with Nell, sorry, Shirley, when they have their big blowout argument. But I would have really liked to see more of that debate between her and Steven. So I'm satisfied with what we got, but I would have liked to see more.
Yeah, the closest you get is when you get that flashback about her taking the money from spoilers. Her taking the money from him for publishing the book.
Something is spoilers.
And where she says, "Well, it's just funny that you write all about this of what you wrote about that last night, since you're the one who slept through it." Like, so she is the one who throws that jab at him about like, "Hey, I know it happened, but you do
do
not."
And you think it didn't happen. You think that we're all just crazy.
Well, and I like that she's practical in that way. She doesn't really care that he's slandering their family. But she also kind of does. Like, you can tell she's kind of bothered, but not enough to not take the money, which, same. Like, you offer me a good amount of money, you say whatever the fuck you want about me. I'm just saying,
Yeah. He does seem the quickest to kind of reconnect with her dad when he shows up later, faster than the other ones.
I feel like the only one I feel like she was still estranged, but it was more like Shirley and Steven were the two that were like really, estranged. And I think to a certain degree, we kind of get hints that Steven kind of blames his dad for whatever happened.
Yes.
Yeah. And then we also get that wonderful moment. We'll get there, but just this wonderful moment where you can tell that the dad wants to apologize, and like the ghost of the mom is telling him to, but he can't do it, just because he doesn't come from that
that's
generation.
Such a good moment.
His generation, they don't talk about their feelings; they just ignore them until they go away.
Right.
It's wonderful.
Uh-huh.
So the other things that this sets up is we get some more history of the house. It was like a bootlegging house, back in the 20s, which I thought was a neat little detail. I don't know if any of that comes from the book. I did not, unfortunately, get a chance to finish the book. But the big thing that we have is that Theo and the husband both have a secret. And it sounds like it's the same secret, like they know something, and they don't want Shirley to find out. Noah already gave it away, but it's, the money.
I gave it away?
I give it away.
Oh, sorry.
Sir.
I was
Robert
gonna say
gave it away.
Robert gave it away.
Well, you're Noah, you're Robert now, and Robert, you're Noah now.
We do have the same voice, apparently.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, and the other important thing is that Theo spirals in this episode. Ends up calling the girl from the first episode. Yeah. But then I don't remember. They don't end up going through with it, right? Because she just won't shut up on the phone.
No, she comes over and they do. There's the scene where, at the end of the episode, where she's trying to talk to Theo, and she's like, "How was your day?" And she basically gives the whole thing of
right.
The girl that I helped was getting molested, and all this other stuff happened, and I'm not really familiar with that. The actress's name is Kate Siegel, right?
Yeah.
Who plays Theo. I wasn't really familiar with her before doing the Flanagan series, but
she's basically only in Flanagan stuff.
Yeah, so now I'm seeing more with her. But she's really good in that scene, and there's a few other scenes where she's one of the standout performers in the show to me. We'll get to it later, but the fight, the whole thing between her and Shirley later is another example of that.
Oh, well, so just real quick, I want to bring up, she has 2 kids with Mike, and one of them they named Theodore after this character.
Oh, that's awesome.
That was cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
Well, and the big thing we should mention episode 3, I believe, before we move on to Luke's episode, is initially when Shirley makes the decision to get Nell's body and work on her body and do the funeral herself, which is everyone else is like, maybe you shouldn't be doing this. Yeah. This is, I get it. It's her way of going through it. But when the body first shows up, Theo can't see it. She just leaves. She's like, I can't. And then I think it's at the end of the episode where Theo by herself goes to see Nell's body and touches it, and that's when she breaks down.
Right.
And yeah. I think it's safe to say we, the audience, have a make an assumption about why she breaks down like that. And then when you get the actual revelation later, it's completely different. At least it was for me, where it's like, oh, that's what was going on in that scene. Yeah. Okay, that's not what I was imagining.
I didn't really assume really anything in that scene when she touches Nell's body up, because I was just kind of waiting for there to be an explanation later, because it's kind of left what ambiguous, exactly did she it's left ambiguous, what exactly did she feel, and I do like the explanation later when we get to it.
Yeah, no, I like that it sets up all this stuff and then makes you wait for it. It rewards you for watching. Remember when things wanted to be watched? Too many things.
This wasn't even too long ago. It was only 2018.
Well, yeah, but I don't know. That feels like a lifetime ago in movie and content the way it is now. Flanagan's made 3 shows since then.
Yeah, but it's only 5 years.
5 years is a long time in movies,
I guess. But anyway,
is there anything else that we want to talk about in 3 before we move on to 4?
No, I think that's the gist of it.
Nope.
All right, so we get the Luke episode, which starts with Kid Luke, who is pissed off because nobody believes him about the ghosts that he sees, including his imaginary friend Abigail. How do you guys feel about Kid Luke? Because
no one believes him about Abigail either. I like Kid Luke. I think he's a pretty good actor. For the stuff for the material that he's given. He's not really given anything that deep or complex.
That kid is given a lot of trauma.
Yeah, that poor kid. I feel so bad for him.
So it is
Yeah,
revealed. This is
feel
the
bad for
episode
all
where
of them.
it's revealed that both Luke and Nell can feel each other's physical ailments. Um, which
twin
I
thing.
think even in real life, there's a whole thing with like twins and empathy.
Yeah.
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 This is just kind of literalizing it.
hmm
But it works to make you feel real bad for him later in the episode.
Yep.
Yep.
Present Luke is now 90 days clean. It makes you wonder how long he's been at this, because we don't really establish a timeline for some of those flashbacks. It's just this happened somewhere between the kids' stuff and the current timeline. Somewhere in that time period, these other things happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly the exact time period, but I think they do say like a specific. They do put a specific time to when they started putting him in therapy, because you see there in one of the episodes you see the first time he goes in, and I forget how long ago they said that was, but I think they say that he's 90 days clean now, but he's like relapsed a few times before that.
Well,
So-
we know that. That's why like the siblings aren't talking to him, like want nothing to do with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's 90 days clean in the present, but he says he hasn't been 90 days clean in several years. So it's like, wow.
No, he
Yeah.
this is he definitely has been at this a while, and it's a shame because I think him and Nell are the youngest, right? That's the idea.
Yes.
Yeah, they're the youngest. Yep.
Well,
He's technically a few seconds older than Nell.
yeah, whatever. But no, I like that. I like that it affects the youngest, arguably in the worst way, because arguably the two of them, the twins, are the most screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
And they were the youngest going through it, so it makes sense that they're the most screwed up.
We'll get to Nell because her episode is whew.
Oh my god.
Yeah, because
don't make
the
me
other
cry.
siblings at least have careers. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So President Luke, he's sober, and he meets this woman named Joey, and I really like their dynamic, and those two actors have really good chemistry. And then that happens, and we'll get there.
Probably the most unlikable character in the show.
I go back and forth. I can't bring myself to dislike her, even though she does arguably the bitchiest thing in the entire show.
Yeah, I was going back and forth of what I've thought about her, because you have that scene where they're having dinner with Steven and his wife, and during that scene I kind of felt like Steven again was being a little bit of an asshole to both her and Luke. But then later she does what she does and like abandons him, and it's like, well, yeah, my opinion of her is just going up and down. I don't really know what I think about this character.
Yeah, I'm so like conflicted. But he starts to feel ill. He's hurt, he's cold, his limbs are stiff, and you're thinking this sounds a lot like rigor mortis. Because I don't think they fully established they don't establish it fully before he starts mentioning the symptoms in this adult version that he has that kind of link with Nell. I don't think, do they?
It's somewhere during the episode where he's talking to Joey when he's trying to help her out.
Where's this thing? Well, it's somewhere in the episode.
Well, I know they have that scene where he's like, I broke my leg, and then Nell felt it. They have that conversation. I just don't remember where that takes place.
And then his neck starts to hurt. He starts rubbing his neck a lot, and later we find out why.
I didn't even put that together. Oh my god.
Yeah, no, he would have had to have felt the way they established their connection. He would have felt everything.
Yep.
Arguably, You could have. This could have gone that he died the same minute she did, and I would have believed it with the way they set this up.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, and in the next, I think it's the next episode when we start getting that heavy foreshadowing or implication that he's gonna die, where that's something that comes up a lot throughout the season, and then we see where it goes in the finale. But yeah, it's like those two are definitely linked, but there's also that tragedy around them the whole season.
I don't think that starts to come up until after the funeral.
Are you sure? Because I thought there was I mean, we'll get to episode 5 in a second, but I thought there was a scene with Nell in the motel where she sees Luke.
Maybe.
And she's like worried about him because that's why she's calling the others. It's like, I'm worried about Luke. I think he's overdosed.
Oh, you know what? Maybe
which obviously we get more clarity.
But I also feel like you have a house that's an unreliable narrator.
Mhm.
Because when we get to episode 9, which when I was watching it, I was like, oh, I think episode 5 might be the heaviest episode. I don't know, because 9 goes places.
It does, yeah.
But anyway, so this also sets up Luke seeing the ghost of an abnormally tall man that he later sees in the current times, and it makes you wonder how much of this did they bring with them. Has this been going on, for a long time?
Well, and even Nell keeps seeing the bent neck lady. Long after she's left the house in her adult life, and yeah, we'll get to all that.
Yeah. So Joey runs away from rehab to get high, and Luke follows to get her back. And that's when it starts to kick in. So it must be, if you're looking at it, if you put it in like chronological order, she must die the minute he finds Joey.
Yeah.
No.
Or maybe a little after.
There's when, for some people it's 12:03, for other people it's 3:03, but we get a montage of all the siblings in bed at night waking up, and Luke feels something. And he does, and he
So
has
it's
that
a
vision of Nell.
delayed.
Yeah, but I think that's the night before Joey disappears and he starts looking for her. So it's a very slow progression with his condition getting worse. But he does wake up in the night like feeling his neck, where he has that vision of Nell. And then throughout the day, he just rapidly gets worse and worse.
Okay.
But I believe that's the night before Joey leaves.
This episode also kind of plays with your expectations with Luke a little bit, because the whole time, at least I was like, is he gonna relapse? And I don't know if they do that a little like one time too many throughout the series, but they do it a lot in this episode.
Were you guys mad when Joey leaves? He goes out, finds her, calls the rehab center, and it's like, I get it. It's a difficult job. It's very expensive. There's a lot of other people who want to go in. But were you guys mad at that lady for being like, screw you, she ran, and you went after, you should have known better? I was so angry. I'm like, she just left today. If it's been a week, maybe, but like it's been half a day.
I mean, I think
I was very angry about that.
I think I'd just be more mad at the system rather than specifically that person.
Yeah. As someone who works for it as a call center representative and has to like uphold rules that I don't necessarily agree with, I couldn't be mad at her because I've been in that situation, not with like a drug addict, but where I've had to defend something I don't agree with. So no, I didn't feel mad at her. It's and we get some of this throughout the entire show. I don't know if you noticed that, but we talk a lot about how this show is about grief and mental illness. But there's also some jabs at the healthcare system.
Yes.
When you get that first rehab scene, and it's like $6,000 a week. What the fuck are you spending $6,000 a week on?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Why do you need that much money? For what?
Yep.
Yeah. No, it's one of those difficult things too because I think she says something like, "Oh, we only have slots open for people who want to get better, or, voluntarily want to come." So it's like I kind of understand that, but at the same time, I don't know. She's struggling. Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where I'm more mad at like the system than I am at that person.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Robert's a Karen that she takes it out on the
Robert, yeah.
nurses.
Yep.
Do you brag about making nurses cry?
That's a different situation.
So then we get to this is the scene that pisses me off. Joey steals the money and runs.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone who's been in that situation with family who were addicts, I've been there, and that's why I can't tell because like I can see there's a good person there. It's just she won't.
Yeah.
She doesn't choose to be that person.
Well, I think it's a similar thing to her relationship with Luke is kind of similar to the siblings' relationship or
Mhm.
Luke's relationship with the siblings,
Yes.
where it's like they've given him so many chances, so at this point they're at the point where they don't trust him anymore. And she has like that dinner scene. I think she talks about like, yeah, sometimes I relapse, but I try to, get back. And it made me a little sympathetic for her. But then at the same time, when you get to this scene,
She
um,
screws him over bad.
she screws him over, and it gets to it looks at it just at a realistic way where, there's only so many chances you can give someone, but and if they keep screwing you over and disappointing you, then
Well, and then
what
the
else can
show
you
just
do?
really hammers it home because he's mugged like immediately after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, at that point I'm thinking, okay, now he's gonna relapse. Like that
Yeah.
might be what pushes him over, especially if you're in pain. But
And
he
then
doesn't.
he never does.
We're proud of
Yeah.
our boy Luke. He doesn't relapse. He doesn't rehab.
He doesn't rehab.
He doesn't rehab. He
Hashtag doesn't rehab.
He don't shiv.
But then
He's slicing dice.
So then after that, he gets back in contact with the rehab center, and then Steven picks him up, and he gets the terrible news that Nell is dead. And I thought his reaction to the news was pretty interesting because he doesn't. It's kind of like Shirley, where it's like he doesn't really process it at first, but
I feel like
eventually
he knew. Not like
yeah,
maybe not consciously, but like
it's like the
subconsciously.
connection.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's the connection they have. So it's almost like he was more accepting of it.
Mhm. Well, and I think in a way, each of them kind of goes through their own stage of grief. Acceptance, denial. I can't remember the others.
Yeah, because even I think the only one that like I think when Theo hears about it, she like gets emotional, if I remember correctly.
I think they all do. Like
Uh,
it goes to show that they all loved Nell.
Yeah, but I
Even in
think
the
she
bad
like
times.
immediately gets emotional, whereas like even Steven hears it and it takes a while for him to react. from what I
It
remember.
takes him seeing the body because he has
Yeah.
to freak
Oh,
out at the
yeah.
funeral.
No, that's a great scene. Yeah.
It is
Well,
wonderful.
Mhm.
Okay, are you ready to talk about probably my favorite episode?
The
So
bent neck
far.
lady.
So before we get into it, I want to mention something that only Noah's gonna understand. The last episode of Doctor Who, not this week's, but last week's, reminded me a lot of this episode.
Oh yeah. I was thinking that when I watched this. Yeah.
This is the Nell episode, and whew, this is a
Oh my
dense one,
God.
boys. So since this was your guys' first viewing, did you see any of that coming?
No, and I feel stupid for not. I feel like I probably should have.
I feel
It
like
was-
you never really get a good look at the ghost.
Yeah, they do a
Right.
good job of keeping her in shadow, but oh my God. I mean, maybe we can save it until we get to that scene, but that scene at the end is just so Ugh, heart wrenching.
Yes.
Well, I figured it out sometime during the episode. It also has that existential terror that really gets to me and reminds me of another movie, but I don't want to say what movie because I don't want to spoil it.
Oh.
But it's a very similar situation with the character being tormented by their future corpse. It's like,
Hmm.
oh god. And
Well,
that's
I
what
think. Sorry, go on.
well, it's like all these characters are, as Steven puts it in the first episode, like a ghost is a wish, like a ghost is a regret or something you want, or like, oh, you have a dead loved one that you miss, so you want to see them, and then you see their ghost, possibly
Yeah.
subconsciously, or in Shirley's case, she's haunted by a mistake, a very specific mistake. Like she has her own ghost that gets explained at the very end of the
Yes.
show. And what makes Nell different is she's the only one who's haunted by her future.
Yeah.
And it's really sad, and she
Like,
has no future.
And I
And it
didn't
sucks.
connect with. I didn't realize that that's what the show was going for until later. So I think part of the reason why I didn't see it coming is because I wasn't expecting the show to get weird with time, which
Mm,
I probably should have because of the structure. I like
yeah.
that they actually do something with the linear structure. Like that's a part of the narrative, and like you have a few other moments later where they play with that, like the different timelines kind of interlapping.
it might be the most heartbreaking metaphor for mental illness that I've ever seen.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Because that more
Oh
than
yeah.
anything, it's not just like, symbolism or like an idea about mental illness. No, it is a direct metaphor for, in my opinion, from what I've read and just been described to, of someone going through something like that, of depression or,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
and that actress
Um.
is just so good.
Oh my
And one of her
god.
first
Yeah.
ever acting projects.
No
Oh
way.
wow.
Yeah.
He's great.
It's like what a career making performance. Like she's so
Yeah.
good.
What I like
Well,
about this episode is that this is another thing that disturbed me about the show is that they incorporate the paralysis aspect into it, and you have that really tragic scene where her husband dies and she's not able to do anything about it because she's just paralyzed. So it adds a real sense of tragedy to this episode, but also I like how it's not too ambiguous. Like this is very much a show with ghosts in it. Like there's no ambiguity there. But I do like how they try to add doubt into a lot of the characters' heads by incorporating these like realistic explanations for things. Like this is probably I've never had sleep paralysis. It sounds like the worst thing ever. It sounds like it's maybe my greatest fear. I don't want to get it. Um, but from what I've heard described about it, this sounds pretty accurate. Like, you're just paralyzed there, and a lot of people see figures when they are paralyzed. So there is that kind of real world explanation that might put some doubt into the character's head, and like, well, maybe we are just mentally ill. Um, so yeah, I just really like that aspect.
well, and that's another like moment is with her sleep paralysis. There's a couple scenes where we see that she can't open her mouth, and then that's
Yes.
homaged later when we see her corpse or a ghost of her corpse, and she can't open her mouth because her mouth is sewn shut for the open
Mm,
casket. And you're like,
yeah.
oh. So it's like she was living through that during her sleep paralysis. And you're like, Jesus. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
that's
experienced
terrible.
sleep paralysis a couple times. It sucks.
Oh my god.
I'm with Noah. I have never experienced it personally, but it is probably a top five like fear. I don't like not being in control.
Exactly. Yeah,
And the
no,
idea
it
of just
just
like not being in control terrifies me.
yeah, I can't deal with that at all. That's like my biggest fear is getting sleep paralysis. But yeah, no, this is maybe the saddest episode of the show. It's
Mhm.
relentlessly bleak up until, a certain point. Like the first half of the show is just like, well, actually, like a good chunk of the show is pretty bleak. Um, but it starts off on that track, and then this is like the peak of that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's the most gut wrenching episode for sure.
Yeah.
And the another thing, a couple things I wanted to touch on. So she marries a guy named Arthur Vance, and her name Nellie is a nickname for Eleanor, and Eleanor Vance is the protagonist of the book. So that's cool.
Okay.
Little Easter egg. Later, at some point into this, I want to get into like all the Easter eggs and references I spotted because I noticed many. But
Well, the
that's
dad
one.
himself is a reference.
Mhm. And the death, one of the most gut wrenching things is when her husband dies. She thinks that a ghost killed him, the bent neck lady killed him, the house killed him. That's how she rationalizes it. And then we find out later, like, nope, it was just a brain aneurysm. It was just random. Just life sucks sometimes. And
Yeah.
that's the stuff I find really terrifying. Like those reminders of, oh yeah, your body can just decide to stop living. Like that just happens.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my god. Like that's the stuff that I find really heavy because you're waiting for that twist. Like, because you want to be on Nell's side. Like, yeah, the ghost killed him. There's a reason for it, but there's no reason. It's just random, and it really
It
sucks.
is. Yeah. And that's another one of the because she talks about it with the therapist, and that is Russ Tamblyn who plays the
Yes.
therapist, who was in the original movie.
Yep, he played Luke.
Yeah, Dr.
And
Jack.
Owen Wilson
Dr.
played him in the 90s
Yep.
movie.
It's
Sure
Dr.
did.
We got a
Jacoby from
commentator on
Twin
that.
Peaks.
Yep.
Yeah.
We got to do a commentary on that 90s movie. It sounds wonderful.
Oh god, it looks really bad from what I've
That's what I
heard.
said.
yeah.
It looks wonderful.
But yeah, the brain aneurysm with her husband. That's another one of those realistic aspects that's just thrown into the show that makes you kind of doubt a little bit. But like I said before, ultimately it is a ghost thing. But I like that it's not. They don't go the more predictable route and he did die due to like a supernatural event like you said, Robert. It's sometimes life is just random and bad things like that just happen.
See, I think it's more ambiguous. Like, of course, science isn't going to detect that a ghost killed him.
Well, but
Yeah.
there's the scene with Theo where she forces Theo to touch the ground because she's like, I still feel him. He's still here. And Theo's like, I feel nothing. Like, that.
But that doesn't prove that a ghost didn't kill him. It just means he's not haunting her.
Yeah, but we see her. But but the bent neck lady doesn't kill him.
Yeah, because that
But
scene
Theo
is
not sensing him still being there doesn't prove that.
But why would
but
Nellie, the
would
bent neck lady, kill her husband?
Yeah, why would she do that?
I'm just saying. I think it's
because it's presented at first like this evil bent neck lady came in and just killed her husband, but then by the end of the episode,
But why would the bent net lady haunt herself to end up driving her to become the bent neck lady?
I think that's just the house forcing her to
Mhm.
haunt herself. I don't think the death really had anything to do with
But
the house.
would the house force her to follow her?
I mean,
It can't be
the
that
house is pretty
powerful.
evil.
But it's also been starving for 20 years.
That's how I read it.
Hmm.
Like, it's basically manipulating time to drive Nell crazy and then eventually kill her.
To be fair, when you get into time travel, if you think about it too hard, you're going to go cross-eyed.
Yeah, your brain's going to explode.
So, like, whatever. I like that it's more ambiguous. Like, yes, I think it is more likely that it was an aneurysm. But I could also see somebody saying, well, the ghost somehow, or the house caused the aneurysm through the ghost, or, I think there's any number of explanations. We're just given the scientific one.
Yeah. Yeah,
Agree
I
to
like
disagree.
I like the more random, tragic aspect of it, but yeah. Um, Anything else we want to talk about with this episode?
Yes. So we've only talked about the Nell stuff. This is also the big argument episode in the funeral home, um, which carries over into the next
No,
episode.
No, that's just episode 6.
Well, no, because this is the one where they're arguing and then they find the buttons on Nell's face.
no,
That's
that is
episode
episode 6. Yeah, that's the
Oh,
next
I'm
one.
sorry. I am looking at this.
Yeah.
We're like, you're talking about a different episode.
No.
Do you want-
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
just
go on.
other than the fact that you reveal the bent neck god damn bent neck lady. I say that 5 times fast. Is Nell, and that's horrifying and tragic.
Yeah. Well, I guess we could also talk about, because she goes back. You see her actually go back to the house, which was, that happened in the previous episodes, but you actually see her side of it. And this is where her final moments are pretty sad. She
She gets to be
sees
with
her
her
mom.
family again and her husband.
Yeah, but
At first.
at
Yeah.
first, and then she's killed.
No, yeah, no,
And-
it is sad. It's just I think it's more of a bittersweet. Like you got this moment, but it
Yeah.
ended up killing you.
But then you also see that image of her just dancing alone, like
Mhm.
with this invisible person. And that is just, I think, inherently a really sad image.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But you see Olivia, which they do some obvious setup for later. So
Of
Yeah,
course.
like I said, at the end of this, I'd like to get into like all the references I caught, but that's one of them. And I'm just going off the '63 movie. I'm assuming all this stuff is from the book, but maybe
Okay.
these are just movie references. But yeah, like this is a very loose adaptation of the book. But the protagonist in the book, Eleanor Vance, there is a scene where like she's dancing like alone. So that's one
Okay.
of the direct callbacks you get. And of course, her therapist, not just played by the actor who played Luke, Russ Tamblyn, but he's also playing Dr. Montague, which is the name of one of the characters in the book. Very different character, and arguably horrible therapist. The show is not anti-therapy, but if you're gonna suggest, hey, maybe the way to combat your trauma is to go back to the place, you need to be specific. Like, okay, I'm gonna go with you, or you're gonna bring a buddy. It's gonna be during the day. Like, don't just say,
Right.
you just need to go back to that house. You'll be fine. Like, that seems
Yeah.
like a really bad idea.
Yeah, it's not exactly anti-healthcare, between that and the stuff with Luke in the previous
To be
episode.
fair,
It's anti-bad healthcare.
Yes.
but also to be fair, it makes a note of her kind of purposefully misinterpreting his advice. Because we also get that really wonderful scene where she goes and like calls her brother out in front of an audience, in front of one of his audiences.
I was
Because
with her the whole time.
The therapist told her to confront her siblings, and then she tells him, he's like, "That's not quite what I meant."
Yeah, not exactly.
Because I mean, he also said, confronting the house, because he has that wonderful monologue about how it's kind of a carcass at this point. It's been empty for 20 years. I don't think he meant go alone, but I do also agree she's already done what you said, but like in the wrong way once. You should have anticipated she'd do it again. Anything else we want to talk about with episode 5?
No, I'm all set. I'm ready to move on to my favorite episode.
Go. All right, so episode 6. Since you two say this is your favorite episode, this is not my favorite episode. It is up there, but I think I like episode 5 a little bit more. Tell us about episode 6.
So episode 6, this is basically what the first 5 episodes have been building to, with this bleak tone and the like tension between the different family members. I think that this is the first time you see all of them, obviously, except for Nell and Olivia, all together, like in the same room.
Mm.
I could be wrong about that, but
They do show up in that room.
yeah, well, oh yeah, as ghosts, yeah, they are there, but not throughout the whole thing. Um, but yeah, so this is the episode where they all get together at before Nell's funeral, and all of their like tensions come to a boiling point, and meanwhile you have all this supernatural stuff happening in the background. But this is a classic example of a TV episode that's a one take episode, but kind of sorta because it's a bunch of different one takes like stitched together. Um, it doesn't do the Birdman or 1917 thing of it's like a cut that that goes into the next part of the movie and it seamlessly looks like it's all one take. It's just a series of 3 or 4 different one takes. And it's certainly not the first time that this has been done in TV before. For whatever reason, the one I immediately think of is "It's Always Sunny." Has that one? There's Charlie, the episode Charlie Work, and they have that one take scene at the end. True Detective has a scene like that at the end of one episode in season 1. And then more recently, The Bear did in season 1. They did a whole one take episode, and I think it was a genuine one take. There was no like editing in it at all. But yeah, I really appreciate this episode, and I like it more than 5. Even though I still like 5, I like this one more just because this is like, as I said before, this is really where you see the family fall apart, and this is where really all of the shit hits the fan. This is where feelings are hurt, and I think everyone in this episode gives a great performance.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Well, and part of the tragedy of it is all Nell wanted was for the whole family to be together, and it takes her death to get the rest of the family together. And but not in the way she'd hoped, because it's a whole lot of fighting.
Yeah.
But it's great. It's also the first time where
Yeah.
we see a lot of the older version of their father, played by Timothy Hutton. And I like both him and Henry. We haven't really talked about them yet. Him and Henry Thomas as their father.
Henry Thomas. Yeah.
I think they're both good, and I think there's enough of a resemblance. It's just a little more jarring when like those actors aren't that far apart in age in real life, and you
Yeah.
go from like a middle-aged guy to a guy later in his middle age. So it's a little more
Yeah.
jarring, at least to me, that they're played by different actors. But like, it's fine because
No, I agree. I also had that.
but it's more jarring with them than like going from kids to adults.
Yeah, because at least
I-
with the kids, there's a greater like time gap. But
Yeah.
with this, I almost wondered if they could have just put Henry Thomas in like old man makeup, but that probably
I
would have
think
been
you could've.
distracting.
But yeah,
Yeah,
I
depending
I
on
think
how
you
it's
could've,
done.
but
Put
if
some
you
gray
don't
in
pull
his
it off,
hair.
it's not worth it. Yeah.
Or just
You
put
don't
some
even
gray
need
in
old
his
man
hair,
makeup.
yeah.
Just put some gray in his hair.
Yeah. Even Timothy
Yeah.
Hutton though is a lot younger than like the character's supposed to be. So even him, like
Yeah.
I thought you could have made look older, but I think they're both good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I'm ultimately fine with it because both actors are really good.
Yeah.
Well, and he plays him so differently though, because he's such a shell of his former self. Like he's so quiet and kind of
Yes.
spaced out a lot of the
Yeah.
time, which we get more into later. But it's such a great like this. How earlier you mentioned how like there's a show about grief and it's about a family dealing with a suicide. Most of that's in this episode, where the fighting, the reminiscing, the yelling back and forth, like all of it, it's just like, yep, it's just that awkward, weird stage, like of right before a funeral. It's just such a weird point in time for a
Yeah.
family because you haven't had the catharsis yet. It's so strange.
Well, and
it captures
especially
it
for
so well.
especially for this family where there's so much resentment between like
Mhm.
the siblings and towards the father, for especially with Steven thinking that it's a lot of the dad's fault. But it's also just like a really sad episode once you get to the end and you realize that this whole thing has just been a big argument between the whole family and Nell just trying to get them to stop arguing.
Yep.
And
That was my read on it.
yeah, just be a family.
Mm-hmm. And I think as a long take episode, which I know some people can find gimmicky or whatever, I think this really justifies it because our first 5 episodes were set up with our individual characters. This is our first time, like you said, seeing them as adults in the same room. So I think there's a justification for the long takes where we are in one room with all of them together and we, the audience, feel like we're in that room with them, just going through it. So I think there is a narrative justification for the long take instead of it just being a gimmick.
Yeah, no, it works for the narrative. And then you also cut back and forth between the present and then one night back at Hill House where there's a hailstorm and all the kids are there, and there's one point where they lose Nell and they can't find her, but she was there the whole time. So it's just contrasts really well with what's happening in the present with that.
Yeah, and again, that horrible, tragic realization at the end when you find out that in the past, like she was there the whole time.
She was also there the whole time.
They couldn't hear her. They couldn't see her.
He was in the room all along.
What was going on? Yeah. So tragic.
No, yeah, and I really like how each of the actors play off of each other. Like, it really feels like a family that is just bickering and,
yeah.
Well, and we mentioned earlier that we get Steven's like breakdown when he sees Nell's body, which is the first time you see him kind of lose it, and it's played so well and it's so believable because he's a character who's had it together, and then it just breaks.
Yeah. Because I like that actor. I think he's good throughout most of it. But this was really the first moment where I was really impressed with him when you finally see Steven like break and he's not just like calm and collected like he is for most of the episodes before this.
So it's also important to notice that this is where the family starts to experience odd things together. There's 2 buttons on Nell's eyes. Steven sees his mom's ghost. The power goes out. And then that's when Shirley catches Theo and Kevin in a room together. Which I have a question about with one of the flashbacks, but we'll get there. Or maybe that flashback has already happened. I don't remember. And then, the family confronting Hugh, they want to know what's really happened because he's kind of iced them out.
Well, we'll get to the rest of the full context later, but when we get that scene of Shirley walking in on Theo and Shirley's husband, did you guys read that as like, oh, this is an affair that's been going on for a while? Like, Theo could be bisexual. I don't know. Like, that was which obviously is not true, as we learn later, but that was my take. I was like, oh, shit.
No, so I was always like, there's clearly something else. This is clearly a misunderstanding. And if I have to have a criticism with this episode and kind of the rest of the series, I'm not really a fan of this whole thing.
I think the show makes it pretty clear that she's gay, and it makes it kind of clear that the sister knows that she's gay.
Yeah.
But then the sister just kind of forgets that, so she can be mad at her for being in the room with her husband.
Her husband. Yeah.
I'm with with Noah. That all feels very forced.
Very forced. I do like how it ends, and you see later why Shirley is so mad. It's more than just that. But as a conflict, it just feels really forced and like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this whole stupid love triangle thing.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's barely even a love triangle, like you said.
Yeah, just like a misunderstanding. Yeah.
I like the way it's resolved, so I can roll with it. And to be fair, I believe this is the episode where Shirley finds out that her husband was lying to her about another thing. about taking
Yeah,
the
about
money.
the money.
So
Yeah.
it's already been established that her husband has lied to her about something, and she's not
Yeah.
happy with him. So I feel like the show earns it. And although for people who don't like Shirley, one thing we learned about later, I mean, she's totally a hypocrite in
Of
this
course.
situation
Yeah.
with how angry she is.
Yeah,
at
my-
she's lying about something and he's lying about another thing, so
Mhm.
yeah.
Typical marriage. No. No, I don't know if the show earns it though, because we've already established that he's not Theo's type, and the sister knows that. She is entirely too rational to fly off the handle and forget fact like that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Theo could be bisexual. Like, I don't know.
I don't know.
She
I
doesn't
feel like the show makes it pretty clear she doesn't swing for one team.
Yeah.
Maybe. Well, but we've already had hints that like Shirley doesn't completely approve of Theo's uh lifestyle.
Okay,
Not in
but
that
then
way,
why would she?
but like,
But what does that have to do with her thinking that they're having an affair?
we just established that her husband was lying about something. So, and also it's ambiguous that she doesn't know if her husband was coming on to Theo. So, like, I don't know. Like, point is, she's really mad at her husband.
She's
and
also-
that makes it
But it's
worse.
really because she's mad at herself, which we'll get to
Yeah.
later.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's a big gap there that they just kind of hope you forget about.
She is rational, but ever since Nell's death, like, she is losing it. Like all the characters are.
They've all
She's
been
not.
losing it. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like you could have done that a little differently to make it not throw her under the bus a little bit in that way. Like there's other ways you can throw her under the bus, and we do later, and it's really interesting.
Yeah, but episode 6 is probably my favorite episode. Do we have anything else to talk about with that, or should we move on?
Since someone mentioned it, this is the episode where Shirley finds out that both her husband and Theo took the money that she disagrees with, and this is where we really get morally superior Shirley.
Yeah.
And this is the episode where if you don't like her, you're gonna hate her. If you like her, you might still like her, you might hate her. It's a flip of the coin. How did you guys feel about her after this episode?
I still liked her. I was a little annoyed with the whole Theo thing because I'm just like, I'm ready for this subplot to end. Like, I don't care about this drama at all. But my thing with Shirley, kind of like I touched on earlier, is she's just a well-written character, and even if I'm annoyed with her actions, I see where she's coming from. So it's not like I don't have the hate for her that I feel like maybe a lot of other people do. I don't know if she's like the fan least favorite. I don't know much about like who people love and hate in the show, but
I don't know anything about reaction to this show.
yeah, no, but overall, you know, I'm still fine with her. And I like every character.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, Shirley and Steven are the most disliked. But like I said, I did like it. And like I said at the top of this, like these are all flawed characters, and a lot of them are unlikable to a certain degree, but I love spending time with them. Which is a great contradiction. Like, yeah, these characters are all screwed up, but like I like this family. I like spending time with them. Which is why this episode's a highlight, because it's the one where you get all of them in the same room together. So instead of just being a spotlight on one specific character, this episode just moves so quickly because you have all these different characters. And one last thing though I want to mention about the Theo and Shirley husband thing that's very important though is it's been established throughout the episode that Theo's getting very drunk. And when Theo mentions that later, Shirley doesn't care. Like, that doesn't make it okay. So I do think it's worth mentioning that you're more likely to do stuff you wouldn't typically do while you're drunk. So, which is another reason why that scene isn't super contrived to me. Because it's like, yeah, we know Theo is gay, but like also she's drunk.
But
you're more likely to do something that you normally wouldn't while you're drunk.
What I would say to that is if you're straight and you get drunk, you don't start hitting on the same sex. Like
I know a few people who are into the same gender, they don't get wasted and start hitting on the opposite gender of what they're attracted to. It
I
doesn't
don't know.
suddenly give you new urges. It just frees the one you already have.
Yeah. But anyway,
Anyway,
yeah.
does anybody have anything else they want to talk about with Two Storms before we move into eulogy? And as much as I am enjoying this episode by episode discussion, we need to kind of try to pick it up a little bit because we're almost to an hour and 45 minutes.
Let's just go on to the next episode.
All right, Robert, tell us about episode 7.
I don't remember. No, so
I
episode
prayed
7,
for this and it
It's
happened.
the funeral episode.
Yeah, Luke gives a great eulogy. So good. And then the episode.
And then
Yeah,
he steals
that's all
the
I got.
car.
Yeah.
And then they're like, "Oh no, did Luke relapse?" That's kind
Mhm.
of the moment I was talking about earlier, where I was like, they maybe do that whole subverting your expectations of, you know, making you think that he's about to relapse
Mhm.
one time too many with this. Like I think I would have been fine with the scene of Luke just like getting Theo's car, or just like you seeing like it, you know, getting inside his head a little bit more instead of just leaving it as a reveal.
But I think either way, you would have still had the family thinking that he's going to overdose, or not overdose,
No,
but like
yeah,
he's going
it's
to
just
relapse.
the way. Yeah, but I would have liked to see his side a little bit more, but not a big deal. Overall, this episode's it's all right. It's just kind of like a stepping stone episode to the next few.
This has
But
a big
it's got
reveal
good
though.
moments.
This is where you find out that Hugh has been haunted by his wife this entire time.
Or has he?
Right. Or
yes,
has
he has.
Or has he?
Yes, he has.
I didn't know that there was ambiguity to this. Okay.
Please explain the ambiguity here, because you can see her.
Well, he can see her.
And so can we.
Right, but we could just be in his head. Like, it is mentioned later that he could. That's just an imaginary version.
A coping mechanism.
A coping mechanism.
I don't know. Nothing.
But
and then Ghost Olivia in the finale says, "That wasn't me. I'm the real me." Of course, she could be unreliable. Okay. I'm just saying this is presented in the show. I'm not making this up.
But none of the ghosts that we see are just in their head.
No, so I must have missed that line about that not being her, Robert. Okay, because from what I understood, how I interpreted it, is that was the same ghost that's in the house. But I guess I was wrong about that.
I'm also not entirely sure the one at the end is Olivia. I think that might just be the house.
It could be. Well, and I also think Ghost Olivia just acts very differently when we see her with Hugh and when we see her in the house. The house, which is why you said, like, it might just be the house. That might not even literally be her, because the house version's a lot more sinister.
Right.
His Olivia feels like the Olivia he remembers, of that loving, nurturing wife, you know? There's never anything creepy with her with him, like, hey, we need to go to the house. And it would be really cool if we all just died together. Like, you know, there's never any sinister undertones in those scenes.
Yeah.
Well, and we also get this is where the Hugh and Theo finally kind of make up and admit, you know, to their wrongdoings.
They see a ghost.
But I think this is the episode that has that wonderful scene, right, where Olivia, the mom, is like trying to get Hugh to open up to Steve, and he's just he can't, because that's not who he is.
Yeah, she just spells out exactly what he should say to Steve, and then he's just like, "Hope you make your flight."
I don't know if we talked over it or skipped over it. I can't remember, but there's a series of flashbacks that actually show Hugh fixing the house, and there's that one where the fan turns back on.
Oh God.
Oh God.
Oh yeah. No, that is this episode. Yeah, because this is the Hugh-centric episode.
Yes. I actually like this episode quite a bit, because I like Hugh. That might be kind of biased because, like, the actor's in one of my favorite movies of all time, but no, I like this episode quite a bit because we get to see Hugh, and it kind of starts to. This is where we really start to fill in the blanks of what happened that night.
Yeah.
And also, what happened to
Actually-
Hugh? Because like, you can see how he
Yeah.
became broke. Is he refuses to let anybody into that house.
Mm-hmm. No, actually, the more I remember it, I think I do like this episode more than I remembered because I like all the flashback stuff in it.
So I was gonna save it for episode 9, but I'll bring it up here because this is where Olivia also starts to act more disturbing. Her arc is just The Shining.
Yes.
She's
Even
just
limps.
Jack Torrance. And I don't
Yeah.
mean like the movie Jack Torrance, I mean the book, because in the book
Mhm.
he's getting headaches, all of his hangover symptoms start coming back. He starts chewing through Excedrin, which ugh. Um have you ever tried to chew a pill that's not meant to be chewed?
No.
Don't enjoy it.
Yeah, no. But no, it's just The Shining, and I think that's what I like about it so much is that, and it's a slow burn, The Shining, like a proper slow burn of like, it just starts with little things.
Mhm.
Well, okay, so if I'm gonna get into one of my criticisms, it's white people shit. You always get this in haunted stories where after that horrible traumatic experience with the storm, not even counting all the incidents with the kids seeing ghosts and having nightmares before that, the storm should be the straw that breaks the camel's back, where it's like, dude, get your family out of that house for a day. I get it. They do present the logical issues. They sunk a lot of money into this. They can't just afford to.
So what's the
you know,
issue?
that-
They
that-
explain why they don't.
like, get your family the hell out of that house after that horrible.
Okay, but you just
Traumatic
said they
experience.
explain why they can't do that.
That's a flaw with that character.
Yeah,
But I buy it.
sure. Okay, but what does go too far for me, where I'm like, okay, you could have toned that back a bit, because as we find out later, they do finally get Olivia out of the house to go see her sister, but by that point it's too late. She's already too far gone. But the scene where he wakes up to her holding a screwdriver at his neck, that's not a, hey, let's try to figure this out over the next few days. That's hit the emergency button. Let's figure something out
Yeah, I guess
now,
so.
not just
You're
wait a weekend.
getting-
I'm going to plant my flag on that one. That's a bit far.
I
I think
don't see the problem. That's when she leaves.
It takes a few days.
Well-
It goes from she's gonna leave in a week to, okay, maybe we'll bump that up to Monday, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah, because she has
George,
logical reasons for not wanting to go.
she doesn't. There's not even that much resistance from her though. I mean, there's a little, but it's like, dude, if you wake up to your significant other holding a screwdriver to your neck, it's like, okay, we need to figure something out now.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I
see what you're saying.
I'm gonna say that's an actual nitpicky criticism on my part.
Um,
After the weekend, you'll see your aunt or you'll see your sister, then you'll be fine. And
I
I'm
do
just gonna
think that
assume I'll be
scene-
okay the next 2 nights.
So what is she just supposed to drop in on her sister unannounced?
Yes, or somewhere else.
I think that scene though is pretty funny, just because in a weirdly dark way. Just because he's like, "You have a screwdriver to my neck. You were gonna kill me," and she's like, "No, I wasn't." She's like
Yeah.
smiling.
Yeah, at that point, it's like, dude, your wife has lost it, and you need to figure something out.
She needs help.
Yes.
So the other big thing in this episode is Hugh finds the original owner who bricked himself up inside the house's walls.
Yep.
Wonder what that could be referencing.
Well, and I didn't
Something that
catch this
Flanagan
watching,
did later.
and I didn't catch this while watching this. I only know this from the credits or from like the cast list. But the tall man that Luke keeps seeing, that is the guy who bricked himself in the wall. Like, that is the original owner. I didn't put that together while watching this, but that is who that ghost specifically is supposed to be.
Interesting. See, this is one of those where I think you could have done another season of this, but not about the Cranes. Just like about the people that died in that house.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah,
give me,
like you
give me
could
a
do a
show
prequel.
about William Hill.
Yeah, why'd he do that?
You can't do that.
Why'd he do that?
Yeah, and in the book, there's also like a tragic backstory with the original owners of the house, but it's very different. And in the book, it's actually the Cranes who were the original owners. But in the show,
specifically
the Cranes
Hugh
are
Crane.
family. Yes.
Well, it's interesting because from what I've read of the book, because Hugh Crane is the owner, like the original creator of the house, and then you have all these characters that come to the house, whether it be to inherit it or whatever, and he just took all those characters and made them Cranes. And it's like you're the most fucked up family to ever exist on cinema now.
Yeah. One of,
yeah.
Honestly, I'm gonna be honest. Episode 7 and 8 kind of blend together for me. I can't. I'm actually kind of struggling to tell.
It's
which
all
which
built,
one is which.
I don't disagree, because it's that weird thing of we're almost towards the end of the series and we're building up to something else now, where the first half is building up to the funeral. Now we're building up to what happened that night.
Yeah, because correct me if I'm wrong. Episode 8 is just them driving for a whole episode, right? That's like them trying to find Luke.
Yes, and it has the greatest jump scare in the entire show, and it gets me every time.
Yeah,
it's a good
that
one.
got me when I first watched it. Yeah,
but no, it is driving because that one I think is also the majority flashbacks, because that keeps setting up. We're getting to this point. But the last thing that we need to mention about 7 is Hugh says that the red door remained locked, because we flash to him talking to the police. Then it flashes back and the door is open. So we're coming back to the red room. Yep. Gee, red room. I wonder what that could be referencing. Red room. I can't get away from it.
It's referencing Twin Peaks.
Yeah, but Twin Peaks isn't as good as The Shining.
But it's the red room.
Red room. Anyway, so since Noah brought it up, we'll get to episode 8. Okay, this is kind of mostly driving around. We've split everyone into groups of 2. Stephen Hugh. I don't know why I said Leo. What the? Are Leo driving around to find. Are driving around to find Luke. Shirley and Theo are back at the funeral parlor and arguing over Theo and Kevin in the storage room. And I think that's the argument where I started to get really annoying, because I'm like, okay, I know you can't be stupid enough to think that she was trying to sleep with your husband. Come on now.
Yeah, I was ready for that stuff to be over. Although I did, the one part of that, I thought did you just punch me in the boob? I thought that was funny.
That fight's great.
No, that was a very sibling-y, interaction. And then this is where Hugh starts to reveal to Steven that he's been seeing Ghost all along. And then he was arguably the most sheltered of all of them, because they just let him believe that none of it was real.
Yeah.
And then Shirley and Theo end up going to Hill House, and Nell's ghost jump scares them in the car. And I don't care how many times I see the show. This is probably my 3rd or 4th viewing. It gets me every time.
Yeah, then it leads to probably my favorite scene with Theo's acting, where she has that whole
she's so good.
monologue. Yeah.
Yes, as we alluded
a monologue
to
in a Mike Flanagan project.
This is a good one. Most of them are good ones in this show. We'll get to
People complain about his monologues, but I think they're all great.
Yeah, most.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how I feel about Midnight Mass, because I know that's a contentious part of that show. But
well, it's contentious for some people, and everyone else calls it a masterpiece. So I'll see what I get to.
The correct answer is it's a masterpiece.
Well, I'm just saying that too, because I was fine with most of the monologues in this show, but yeah, let's keep talking about it.
But with Theo, though, we get the revelation of what exactly she experienced when she touched Nell's body, and it's really sad.
It's
and horrifying.
It's like it goes back to that kind of like existential dread that the show goes to a lot.
Yeah.
It's just another really sad scene and very well acted. So yeah,
I guess there's not really any flashbacks in this episode.
Oh, so it is just driving.
This might be
It's
a
just-
shorter episode because I know some of them aren't even an hour long.
Yeah, I think this was like the 140-minute one, where the rest were like 50 minutes to an hour.
Yeah, it's kind of just
Well-
sandwiched in there. It's like, well, we got to move all these pieces towards the finale.
Yeah.
There's also though that great scene between Hugh and Steven where Hugh talks about reading the book and all these instances where he's like, "Oh no, you totally saw ghosts. You just didn't know."
Yeah.
Like he's finally being open with his son, but he's like, "Oh yeah, that guy working on the clock. Yeah, that was a ghost, dude. I never hired a guy to work on that." And like here, and he breaks down why that didn't happen. And then a big one is he says, "Oh yeah, when you and Luke were hanging out in a treehouse, yeah, there was never a treehouse. When would I have time to build why would I build a treehouse for a
Foreshadowing.
place we're
Yeah.
gonna be for 3 months?" And then
Mhm.
really great foreshadowing there with where that goes. So yeah, like there's it's not one of my favorite episodes, but there's great stuff in it.
Yeah, it's
So
an important
to-
episode, though.
To mention, it is very important. It is only 43 minutes.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
no, this is just we've got some last few threads to tie up and move forward, and then we're getting everyone close to the finale, and then we're gonna drop probably the heaviest episode of the season next. But before we get into that, does anybody want to continue on? Oh, we need to mention Steven because this,
Yes.
I believe, explains why he and his wife are separated, which we did not bring up. But
Yeah,
him and his wife are
Second
separated,
me.
and he is an asshole.
Yep.
He's a huge asshole.
So we set up that they're separated, and he hasn't really told anyone. But they are separated, and it turns out it's because he had a vasectomy and didn't tell his wife, and they were trying to have kids.
You know, that probably should be the first thing you say if your wife says, "Hey, let's have kids."
Yep.
No, and I feel so bad for her because like they're at the doctors and everything.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, like it got to the point where they were having meetings with a doctor about this, and he's just going
Like,
along like,
If
Yep.
if you don't want if you want to play along, or
Yeah.
just be like, well, either just undo the damn thing or tell her the truth.
Yeah, exactly. Just tell her the truth. But no, I think we can probably move on to the Olivia episode,
Oh,
which is
okay.
another one of my favorites. I love that this one is all in the past, which it kind of has to be.
Yeah, it kind of balances out. And to your point, though, I almost wonder if you could have combined 8 and 9, made a slightly longer episode, and
The
just
only-
kept the
I'm
really
glad they did
important
it.
stuff.
The only problem with that is that what happens in 8 isn't really relevant. It doesn't go together
Yeah,
with what happens in 9. So
that's true. So this is the Olivia episode, and it is the one where she starts going full Jack Torrance, and you never go full Jack
Yeah.
Torrance. Robert, tell us about Screaming Mimes.
Well, as you said, this is the Olivia episode, and we get a lot of scenes we've already seen before, but now from her perspective, like the scene with Hugh with the screwdriver, or when Steven, had this gift for her, and then she smashed it because she
Yeah.
saw a ghost. It's
Spooky
like all
ghost.
it's so brilliant the way we've seen her through the lens of other characters throughout the season of her going nuts, and this whole episode is just her perspective of her experience with the ghosts, and it's great. And then we finally see what happened. The big revelation at the end is just what happened or I guess some of that's in the finale, but we get a little bit of it here of what happened in the Red Room. And yeah, it's really dark.
Well, I think that's right at the end of this episode where they have the tea party.
Yes.
And then we get more of that in the finale, obviously. But yeah, I buy her descent into madness. I think it comes from a place of love. She
Yeah.
wants to protect her kids, and It kind of ties back in with episode 2 with there's that scene where she's arguing with Hugh where she's like, "Why did you let Shirley keep those kittens?" And now her first experience with death, um, she's traumatized from it, and it goes back to the idea of her wanting to protect her kids from any harm. So, yeah, I think it was a really organic and just really natural way of showing her return.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong on the name, but Carla Gugino,
Yes.
who plays Olivia, does a wonderful job.
Mm-hmm.
Silk Spectre 1. It's the only other thing I know her from.
She's gonna
Yeah,
be.
she's
in Gerald's game, which we're doing next.
Yes.
Oh, I forgot we were doing that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
We should probably mention the Dudleys. We haven't talked about them yet.
Yes.
right.
Who
Yeah,
are
because they're very important.
Yeah, who are lifted from the book, the mysterious caretakers who refuse to stay at the house at night.
They're the caretakers. They've always been the caretakers.
And obviously, when Mrs. Dudley is first introduced, it's through kind of a off-putting lens, like, oh great, she's gonna be a jerk, probably. Like,
Yeah.
that's kind of how she's framed from the kid's perspective. And then this is the episode where you get more of her perspective and her interactions with Olivia, like, oh no, this is actually a caring, good person. When it really clicked with me was Olivia, after one of her episodes, is alone with some of the statues, and there's a shot of Mrs. Dudley coming in, and she's standing in front of an angel statue, and it looks like she has angel wings behind her.
Mm.
Where that shot stood out to me, where I'm like, okay, either we're doing dramatic irony, or this is our tell that, oh no, this is actually a positive, good character. And it's kind of foreshadowing a bit too, but we see that, oh no, like she knows what Olivia's going through and is trying to help. Also, interestingly, is wearing a very bright blue dress that looks very similar to a dress Abigail is wearing in the finale.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll get to that later. But yeah,
and also,
I like the
I also just realized we forgot to mention that scene where Mr. Dudley is talking to Hugh about what happened to their kid, which obviously becomes very important later, and actually pretty important for this episode because he talks about how the house affected his wife, and that's exactly what's happening with Olivia right now.
Yeah, because when he has an interaction with Hugh where he was like, hey, watch yourself, like, I'm drawing a line. And then Mr. Dudley's like, no. Like, this really messed up stuff happens. I would need you to listen to me. Like, you do understand, though, why Hugh finds that a little off-putting. But after you wake up to your wife holding a screwdriver to your throat, it's like, yeah, take the Dudley's
You are
advice.
really on the screwdriver.
No, I see what he's saying, though. Like, he's got a point. It doesn't ruin it for me, but I see what he's saying.
John's like, it happens to me all the time. Like, this is normal, right? You just wake up.
That's just how I wake up. I
If
can't
you
wake up unless somebody's holding a screwdriver to my throat.
You wake up to your partner holding something sharp to your neck. You might want to do something about that.
Yep.
No. Wait.
Yeah, but in this episode, you also meet that one ghost who is, I don't know who that actor is, but she's really good, and she's really just disturbing. Like, she
yeah, we've seen glimpses of her throughout the season.
Yeah,
is that the guy that made the house his wife?
I'm not sure.
Well, are you talking about the one with Olivia?
Yes.
I believe, because she, and before she died, went insane. They talk about that earlier in the season.
Okay,
yeah.
Then you get the title of the episode, "Screaming Mimes."
Yep.
Because the ghost has that monologue about like how awful it is to lose a child.
Well, and also this is the episode that really hammers home that postpartum depression theme. You know, since Olivia's really fixated on the twins and they're the youngest, and you know, not to make light of that, it's a very complicated issue. But you know, there have been those incidents of, for whatever, parents who just can't deal like with kids and think like, oh, if I just kill them, they'll be safe forever. And
Yeah.
yeah, but you see how the ghosts kind of warp her perspective on that,
Yeah.
where she's like, oh, the older kids, they've already been damaged by the world, they've already been traumatized, but the little ones, they're still innocent.
She wanna
I can
protect her
preserve them
babies.
forever. Yes. And
Right.
it's like, oh, just really heavy stuff.
Yeah, really disturbing. And this is I just remembered another episode where you kind of, even though it's set in the past, you do have that crossing of timelines a little bit because the vision that she sees is of the older versions of Luke and Nell. So it does continue to get a little bit timey-wimey, to use Doctor Who terms, with that
Timey-wimey stuff.
stuff. But yeah, no, episode 9's maybe my third favorite episode after 5. But
No,
I
this
don't know
is
how to
this. I
rank
think
them.
this is a top tier episode.
That's great.
Mhm.
Then we get the tea party. Should we talk about the tea party?
Yeah,
Child murder.
so so I was not expecting child murder, and I was not expecting Abigail to be real. She's not a ghost. Well, she is a ghost later, but she was not a ghost up until that point.
No, she was not.
Yeah. So that tea party scene is really disturbing. 'Cause that whole time they keep setting up the rat poison that whole episode, and I think even in previous episodes. So when you see that, you're like, oh no, I know what's about to happen here.
And I like the way it's shot of like Hugh slowly realizing what she's done, and then he can't find her, and it's like a race against time to find her. And then if I remember right, they're in the red room, and
Yeah.
he's too late.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And she thinks it's all a dream.
Yep. And
But
obviously,
you know what's important? She really hung around.
Oh,
uh,
too soon.
In multiple ways, she hung around.
technically,
Yeah,
no.
I got it.
She didn't have a rope. Thinking of Nell.
Nell hung around too in many ways.
I mean, hanged.
Anyway, she hanged around.
Well, obviously, and then the finale will get into more the consequences of it. But earlier, it has been stuff. There's all this stuff that Hugh isn't telling his kids about what happened that night. All he knew was their mom died. And then when he's being interrogated by the cop, there's that question of like there's like this 3 hours that's unaccounted for. That like what happened in those 3 hours, and this is the first time you get like a slice of that answer. It's like, oh, it's because Olivia murdered a child, and that's the big secret he was keeping.
Yeah,
he kept it. I want to know the one thing I was curious about. And I don't know if you guys had this. What did they end up ruling that whole thing? Like, was it an accident that they rule it, or because he couldn't have gone to jail, right?
He definitely didn't. I think it was just ruled a suicide.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, because with Nell's suicide, they talk about how, especially Steven is like, yeah, there wasn't any ghosts. Our family is just mentally ill. So I assume most of them think, yeah, she did commit suicide.
Well, and the consequence though is even though Hugh didn't go to jail, he was still seen as unfit to take care of his children. His children were taken away from him and went into their aunt's custody, but like that wasn't his choice or like not like. So it's like, yeah, we don't got enough to arrest you, but we are saying that you can't raise these kids. Sorry, which really sucks. Right. And it does make me a little sad when they throw their jabs at him later, where they're like, well, you didn't raise us, our aunt raised us. It's like, well, he raised you guys for like the first 14 years. Like, come on.
They took him away from you.
Yeah, but I mean that's never. That's untreated, childhood anger.
Yeah. I get it.
Yeah.
Oh, so the other thing is, I think it's in episode 8. Yeah, episode 8 is when, because that's when Steven and Hugh have the big argument. He talks about how Olivia had wounds on her head and her arms, like she'd been beaten. And you show in this episode, she has that head wound because he like fucking shoves her out of the way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Domestic abuse, folks. Domestic abuse.
This is where it's very similar to Oculus, where at the beginning of Oculus, it seems pretty straightforward. Like, okay, their one parent went nuts and the other died. Like, got it. And then they keep showing you flashbacks, and the situation gets progressively more complicated. And there's layers and layers to that situation that you didn't know at the start. So structurally, it's very similar to that, where it seems pretty straightforward at the start of this. Like, okay, their mom went nuts and it died. That's all that happened, right? And each episode after that just kind of peels back more and more of what actually went down. And it turns out it was a whole lot more complicated. Like, perfect example of that is in the premiere when Hugh's trying to get Steven out of the house, and you get that quick glimpse of Olivia running down the hallway after them, and she looks nuts, like she looks terrified,
Yeah.
like she looks like a monster. But then from her perspective, it's like, no, she's just limping, like
She's just hurt. Yeah.
anxious. Yeah, she's just trying to get, but she's not evil in that moment, or not trying to be evil. She's just trying to get to her.
I don't know if you could say she's not evil. She just poisoned a child.
Well, but then I think it's at that moment where there's the older ghost that's like, she's the liar. And then maybe you start to see like a little bit more like remorse from Olivia.
Yeah. Well,
I think
folks,
Olivia
is there anything
has at
else
least-
we should?
No, I think that's about it. Though I think Olivia does have at least one, like, oh god, what have I done moment before, like, she. Again,
Well,
I might
that's-
feel differently on a rewatch, but it's kind of like Jack Torrance, where like she's flipping back and forth.
No, I agree, because I mean that's the whole thing is once she does it, she kind of breaks, and it's like, oh, this is all a dream. I just want to wake up, and that's what leads her to jump and ultimately kill herself. Noah, any final thoughts about episode 9? Wake up, Noah.
I'm awake. No, yeah, we all need to wake up, guys.
Yeah.
No, but no, episode 9 is great. Let's move on to the finale, which
So
I have
Robert
a little
told me that it
mixed
was
feelings about.
Yeah, so Robert told me this is the most controversial episode. So we were both waiting for you to finish it. So Noah, tell us your thoughts about episode 10.
Oh, okay. Well, I think it's a good episode. There's a lot I love about it. I don't know how I feel about the execution of the ending. I think I may be okay with the ending itself, but I don't know if you guys had it. To me, it felt a little like bordering on sappy, which I was
Yes.
not expecting from especially the first half of this show, which is like aggressively bleak and depressing. And then you get to this, and I'm fine. I don't think it has to necessarily be a tragic ending, but like, I don't know if I needed some of that like sappy music at the end. And then you have that scene with Nell talking to the siblings. She has like her final goodbye, which I'm also just kind of mixed on. Like, I like it. I like it that she gets to say goodbye to her siblings, but this is where you get the reveal that the red room is a different room for each of the members of the family. It was like a dance studio for Theo. It was a reading room for, I think, Shirley, and then the treehouse for Luke, etc. And I thought that was a cool reveal. I really like that, but I think maybe Nell, she's got this big monologue at the end, and
Monologue.
I think it's maybe a little bit handholdy. Like, they kind of do a little too much explaining, and I would have liked a little bit more vague up to interpretation with it, but I mean, as an ending to the show, I think it still works. I don't think I know some people hate how the show ends, and I'm not in that camp. I still love the show overall.
Me too.
I think it still sticks the landing. But I think maybe I just would have changed it a little bit about how it was executed.
I
So.
think this is a wonderful ending because we've already seen these characters hit rock bottom, and this is them
Mhm.
coming out the other side. They are different people now. Yeah, maybe it gets a little too monologue-y, but I don't have a problem with that because I think you need that scene with Nell, and you still have some of the bittersweet, like, you know, them escaping costs Hugh his life, and I like that. I like that. You know, at the end of the day, for at least the kids, it's a happy ending. They deserve it.
I think they definitely deserve a happy ending. I don't. I think maybe some people would have preferred a more tragic ending, and I don't know.
I
That
feel
could have
like that
worked,
would
but
just to come off mean spirited.
yeah, I can see how it maybe could be mean spirited. I can
And
see it.
I am all
I could.
in for bad endings. Noah, you know this about me. I
Yeah,
love bad endings in movies. But I think with a show like this is a 10-hour show, give or take. You put these
right.
characters through so much misery. You need that ray of light at the end.
Yeah, and Mike Flanagan's no stranger to bad endings. Obviously, you've
Look at
got
Oculus.
Oculus. You'd
Yep.
look at Oculus. And I think maybe it is for that reason you just said, John, like the fact that we've spent a lot more time with these characters. It would have been a little bit more cruel to see it end in a tragic way, but yeah, so I'm fine with it ending happily. I just think I think it's more nitpicky problems I have where it's like I would have maybe wouldn't have executed it exactly like that.
So I will say I'm satisfied with where we leave the character. I'm pretty happy with where everyone leaves off. I'm glad they go for more of a bittersweet ending. Like we said in our Oculus review, I respect dark endings when they're executed well. I think Oculus works, and Oculus works because it's a tight 2 hour experience.
Yeah.
But with in the case of a 10-hour investment, yeah, I want some closure. I want some of these characters to get a happy ending. And I know it's a horror show, and some people think that only horror should only end with bad stuff, but I'm a sucker for a good redemption story. That's what I like. So I like where everyone leaves off. And
No,
I've heard a criticism that I just don't think I agree with, where people say, well, redemption isn't scary. I don't want that in a horror story. I'm like, I don't know. I love The Exorcist. That's
Yeah.
one of my favorites, and like that has a bittersweet ending. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
it's not like the redemption negates all of the scares that come before. Like,
Yeah, it's you
I don't
came
know.
out of that, you came through that a better person at the end of the day.
Mhm.
Right.
I am
Um
though. Oh, go on.
well, I was just gonna move on to one of the scenes I really like in this episode is the conversation between Hugh and Olivia about basically parenting and
Mhm.
how he's like, yeah, you can't, you're suffocating them. You need to, yeah, like as, and I imagine this hits harder if you are a parent, but he's like, yeah, like even if they die or get addicted, you need to just bear witness to that, and there's nothing you can really do about it. Um, yeah, I thought that stuff was really powerful.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything more painful you could experience than losing a child as a parent.
Right.
I said early on, like, this is a show about a family dealing with a suicide. But if somebody's takeaway from the show is, oh, it's a show about parenting, I'm not going to argue with that.
It's
Because that's
definitely a part of
absolutely
it.
a big part of it.
It's definitely a part of it. Um, I'd say it's mostly a show. It's a show about parenting, but also a show about trauma and family grief and just like how we process death. Um, and I think it's a little recontextualized with so with the Dudleys. They discover Abigail dies, and Hugh's like, I need to burn this place down. It's evil. And then they're like, no, this is the only way we can see our daughter. So, despite Hill House being this evil place, I don't know if they go too far with like saying, trying to spin it like, oh no, it's a place where you can, be with your loved ones. Like it's a fine place. No, it's still an evil place. They still manipulated Olivia into killing Abigail. Like it's not a good place. But at the same time, there's really no other way. It's really the only way the Dudleys can spend time with their child, and they've already lost one child, so they can't lose another one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
A criticism I have of the finale, and granted, I get that the rules work differently inside the house than outside the house in terms of visions and stuff. It feels something feels off to me, or a little easy, that Abigail dies and then immediately, oh, like no, her ghost is right there. She's just walking around. She's fine. She's just ghost Abigail now. And I feel like before
Yeah.
that, the ghosts were always portrayed a lot more ethereally, like they're in and out, and like they're not always present. Like they have one foot in one reality and another. And then when you get to the finale, both with Abigail and then with Hugh, it's like they die and then they're like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
here now, but I'm Ghost, and I can do stuff,
I'm
and I can
Ghost,
talk.
yeah.
I'm just Ghost. I'm just chilling. Like this might not bother me on rewatch because I do like that reveal a lot with Hugh, where we the audience know like, oh, he's gonna die. He's gonna be with Olivia and Nell. The twist is he's already dead. When the red room opens, and there's a moment that's great where Hugh and Steven are carrying Luke out of the room, and they stop and they're looking at something. And then they keep going. What they're looking at is Hugh's dead body. So that's great. It just feels like the rules changed a little, at least to me, where it's like he's just walking, he's talking, he's carrying Luke, he's doing stuff. And I didn't feel like that's how the ghosts operate in the first 9 episodes. But that might not bother me on a rewatch.
I read that more as they finally accepted the supernatural, so they are more open to it.
Yeah. And like I said, it is different in the house than outside the house.
At that point, the show had earned to play with the rules a little bit. Mess with me a little bit more before you end. What out? Okay, not to rush our episode 10 discussion, but we are at 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm running out of steam.
There's a few other things we should mention.
Yes.
I guess
Noah,
briefly,
what would you like to start with?
So just briefly, we'll talk about how they wrap up the whole Shirley thing. You find out that she actually cheated on her husband a long time ago, and she feels a lot of guilt for that. So her anger at Theo was kind of like a projection of like her anger at herself. And yeah, I can see why if you hate that character, that's just kind of more ammo towards that. But it's really I like it, even though I'm not a whole fan of the whole her being mad at Theo subplot. I do like both how it's resolved, and then I like this further like exploration of it. I'm not sure how I would have tweaked it, but yeah, I think it's wrapped up really well.
Yeah, well, and another positive you mentioned earlier that I also loved was the revelation with the red room, how all the kids were in the room.
Yes.
And how it appeared differently. Like that's such great visual storytelling. I love the production design on that. How they sync up separate. They got that weird window in the middle. Because where I first was kind of figuring it out was when we learned that there was never a treehouse. Where that's when I started to put the pieces together. Like, oh, that was the red room, but I didn't realize the extent of it yet. But then the finale opens with 2 separate scenes we had seen before. One scene of Shirley and Nell trying to get in, and another separate scene of Theo dancing in there and hearing someone at the door. And now they're edited together, and we realize that was happening at the same time. And it's so great. And it's such a great example of editing. I love that. But I'm with you where this is where it shifts more from monologue to exposition dump. And it's just kind of corny. And it's like, okay, you can dial this back a lot. That's my biggest criticism. It's a
Yeah.
lot of Nell's speech. I'm like, you could cut a lot of this. Keep some of this. Like, we get it.
Mhm.
Keep.
Because she reiterates the whole thing earlier where Olivia talks about how the house is like a body, and like
Yes.
there's the red room is the heart, or they I think they said it's the stomach, but then she's like, no, it's the heart or something like that.
Yes. That's the hard
And
house.
yeah, I think that's maybe a step too far. Like, I think the dialogue that we already had about that was enough for us to like pick up on and put the
Yeah,
pieces
but
together
she's also
ourselves.
explaining that to them because they don't know. Like, they don't have the full context.
I'd prefer the characters just
But
figuring it out on their own.
do they need to know? Yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
Well,
the house
and-
has been fucking with them for 20 years. They kind of deserve to know.
I think
Well-
the emotional closure with Nell and the mother is more important than knowing the intricacies of the house. I don't know.
Well, for
I
me,
don't know.
it's
That,
more.
I think that seems fine.
I think it's her explaining how time works. I think that goes on a lot. About like she has
where
a line
she's
about
like, I
time being
thought it was
confetti.
linear. Or
And
Yeah.
what's interesting is that that's kind of what the whole show's built around. That's part of Mike Flanagan's pitch. I heard him talk about this, about how his interpretation of time, or how time works for ghosts, was kind of his whole angle in approaching the show. And I feel like we already kind of got that over the course of the season with both the nonlinear storytelling and Nell and the bent neck lady. Like, I feel like that's already baked into the show enough that I don't need an exposition dump
Yeah.
making that point clear. I think you and some of it's just a bit sappy, at least to me. Like,
Right.
it's just kind of corny. Like, that's my main problem with it. And the reveal with the Dudleys, with Abigail being their daughter and dying, and that's the secret Hugh was holding on to, is like, no, yeah, your mother murdered a child, and I didn't want you guys to know that. I think that mostly works. It's a little contrived that
Is it?
Luke was always seeing this kid, but nobody else was. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm conflicted on it. It's like, that seems like a bit of a stretch, but I also like it.
It worked for me, but I'm with you. Like, it is weird that like the Dudleys wouldn't even like be in the same room with her, or like
Yes.
mention, oh yeah,
Well,
like
but
our
that's the
our
point.
daughter
She's
Abigail.
sneaking out. They don't let her into the house.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And all
but
the other
they-
kids are always usually off on their own doing their own thing. Like, that's why Luke saw it, because he was hanging out on his own.
Well, it's also that kind of, again, it's not a big deal, but of course, like, the Dudleys mentioned having a daughter, but they can never say her name because then that would spoil it for the audience.
Yeah.
Or the other characters who would go, oh wait, Luke has an imaginary friend named Abigail. Now I'm connecting dots. Like, no, so the rest of the family can never know that the Dudley's daughter's name is Abigail. Again, it's not a big criticism. It's just an observation.
I buy that, though, because they're clearly afraid of the house.
Yeah, but like, they still mention having a daughter.
Yeah, but if you don't, if you're that superstitious, I fully believe that they believe in the power of names.
All right. I don't know. Again, and like I said, I want to like it. But then the ending again gets a little corny. I don't know if I need to see the old Dudleys coming back to the house so they can die there and
That's
be with the
fine.
ghosts. Where it's
everyone gets closure.
Yeah, but they're so terrified of the house at night. But once their kid's dead, and it's like, well, we want to spend time with, like, I'm not sure why it's like, just move into the house. Like, screw it. I don't know. It's odd.
Well, they want to go see her, but they don't want to live there because then that would could control them.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. Like, their only job is being caretaker. It's like, I get it. It's just, again, I don't know if
I doubt, even with their daughter there, I doubt they stay there at night. Because that's their big thing, is they don't stay at the house after dark.
Mm-hmm.
That's when the weird stuff happens.
Yeah. On the dock.
I am with you though, Robert. I do think it steps a little too far towards the like schmaltzy territory with
You both
with the ending.
It's fine.
Well,
I have a dark heart.
and one scene that other people find schmaltzy that didn't bother me is like our last scene of the kids is them celebrating Luke's 2-year sobriety.
No, I
That
like
works for
that.
me.
Oh, that was
I like
great.
that. That's the note.
I like
I like
that.
that. That's the note we leave.
No,
on
let
with
it
this
get
character.
schmaltzy after 9 episodes of the most relentless, depressing
Hmm.
It's only a
television.
few. It's not like it doesn't break the show for me. It's only like a few things I would change.
Yeah, and I'm not being apologetic for it or like in denial or whatever. It's like,
That's
no, I like the
fine.
finale. It's just my least favorite. I'm being honest. Like I have criticisms, but
No,
overall I still like it.
we don't do that here. What do you think? This is a review show?
We don't criticize, we only praise.
Anyway, Robert, any final thoughts on The Haunting of Hill House?
It's great. I loved it. I'm anxious to watch it again. Do you mind if for a minute if I rapid fire because I have now seen the 1963
Please go.
movie. If I these are just random notes. So as mentioned earlier, Russ Tamblyn, who played Luke in the original movie, has a cameo as Dr. Montague, which is the name of a character from the book. That's awesome. Also, the characters in the book are basically reworked in the show as being siblings because in the book they're strangers, but they're more or less adapted to this. Like Eleanor Vance, the protagonist of the book, is basically split between Olivia and Nellie. Like elements of her character are incorporated into both of them. There's narration at the opening and ending. I believe that's from the book, or at least it's from the movie. And then obviously the Dudleys are from the book, and Nell's suicide is a reference to book or movie Abigail's suicide, who is a completely different character, but is one of the victims of the house who hangs herself. So what they do to Nell is a reference to that. There's a scene where there's like "Come home, Nellie" or "Come home, Eleanor" written on the walls. That's in the movie. And then Olivia, I think in episode 9, has a speech about like this hailstorm she experienced when she was young, where it was like it was raining rocks. If you guys remember what I'm talking about. I think
Yeah.
Eleanor in the movie has a similar backstory or experience with that. Also, both the movie and the show have a couple lines for Steven where he talks about how like cavemen must have been terrified by like a solar eclipse because they couldn't explain it. They have no idea what that means. It just looks like the world's on fire. That's directly from the movie. That's lifted directly. And also, Steven's kind of a reworking of Dr. Montague from the book, except in the book, Dr. Montague, like, he believes in ghosts and wants to scientifically prove that they're real. Like, he wants to believe that the house is haunted. Whereas Steven in the show is kind of wanting to prove or disprove the existence because he doesn't believe in the supernatural, but, like, he's still, like, doing the tests, like, in the first episode.
Well,
So-
he says he's like, I prefer preternatural or whatever.
Yes,
At the
because
first episode.
that's what's interesting because he doesn't just like no, you were just hallucinating. Like he still has the equipment, he still spends the night there.
Yeah.
Like he's still doing tests like to see if there's any validity or claim. So that's
Yeah.
interesting. The scary spiral staircase, that's from, I think that's in both movies. I assume that's the book, but that's in every haunting. The architecture of the house is very similar, particularly the statues and that creepy spiral staircase. That's in it. And then there's a scene in the show where Theo, like a ghost, is holding her hand. That's from the movie where Eleanor thinks she's holding a ghost's hand. There's another scene in the show where Shirley and Theo are in the funeral home, and there's like all this banging on the walls, and it sounds like people are throwing rocks. That's from the movie. As I mentioned earlier, there's a scene where Nell is dancing with the ghost of her husband, but it looks to us like she's just dancing alone at first. That's from the movie. And then also a line you were just complaining about the heart of the house. That is a reference, except in the original, it's a creepy nursery, and there's a lot of backstory to that nursery, but that at one point is referred to as the heart of the house. So that's kind of the equivalent to the Red Room. And I think there's a scene where somebody's like on the other side of a door, like turning a knob, trying to get in. And those are all the references I noticed. Thank you for
did a lot of
indulging me.
research.
It's not even research, it's just watching the show and then watching the movie. It's like it was really cool because I could just pick out all these little things. So I was like, ooh, I was doing the DiCaprio meme. Like I recognize that.
Doing the pointing.
Well, because the criticism of the show is like, oh, it's too much of its own thing. It has nothing to do with the book and the movie. And I'm like, I don't know. It's a very loose adaptation, but if you're paying attention, like I caught a lot of stuff it was borrowing. So
Yeah.
I think at this point we need to separate movies and shows into categories. Like I do this with The Shining. The Shining is a good movie, but a bad adaptation. This is a great show, but maybe not the greatest adaptation. I think we could separate the two.
It's all a matter of perspective.
Yeah, I
And mine
disagree,
is
but that's
always
that's
correct.
that's a conversation for another time.
No, you're fired.
You
Wow.
just can't bring yourself to say that this is a terrible adaptation.
Okay, fine. It's a terrible adaptation, but it's a great show.
Yeah, it's a very loose.
I guess I can do my final thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
go
wait,
for it.
before you do that, Robert, final score.
Ooh. Are we doing? Are we still doing out of 5?
Yeah.
For the
Yep.
shows. Give this a 5. I don't care.
Oh.
Yeah, I have issues. It's like most of the episodes are 5 out of 5 for me. The finale's probably more of a 3 out of 5, but I don't care. Most of them, I'm not good at math. Most of them are 5 out of 5. Therefore, the whole show is 5 out of 5. I don't care. Sue
I'm
me.
so
I
glad
love
you
the show.
said that.
I think it's great. Well, there's other things we talked about that I love, where it's like, yeah, I have problems, like I have flaws, but I'm still giving it a 5 out of 5. I thought this was great. I can't wait to rewatch it.
Noah, final thoughts and score.
Final thoughts. Basically, I'm kicking myself for not watching this when it came out, when everyone was hyping it up, because I
Noah's
loved it.
inner hipster strikes again.
It's more just like I kept forgetting, but yeah, no, this show's awesome. Like I said before, Flanagan's strongest aspect in his work is his characters, and I think these are maybe his strongest characters in what I've seen of his work. And besides being a good character drama, it's just got a really good atmosphere, and it is a really disturbing show in places. So it is a good horror show as well. Um, I didn't have like trouble going to bed after this, but I just do think the best way to watch this show is like at night with all the lights turned off. Like it's just got that
Yeah,
haunted
if you're a
house vibe.
sadist.
No,
Oh, no, I
I'm,
loved
I'm
it.
with
I-
him. No, this
I
is
loved it.
this is the perfect show to watch at night with the lights out.
Yeah, just all the lights in your house off. Just watch the
So-
show. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but real quick because I just want to compound on what you're saying. I have this thing where I don't get, not a lot of things get emotional reactions out of me. So when something does, it gets bonus points because you actually made me emotional about something. This is a perfect example. And I
Yeah.
love watching it after dark because it's like, I have that emotional connection to a piece.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I was saying before, I love the vibe of the show. I love how the like creepy aspect of it. It's not that it didn't really scare me, or anything like that, but I was more so emotionally affected by the show just because I was so invested in all the characters. And I liked, how it turned out. But I think out of 5, I'm gonna disappoint you guys, but I'm gonna give it 4.5.
Get out of
loses-
here.
loses-
Boo!
Why do you hate it?
Why
Why do you hate things?
No, I just gushed about it for a minute. I will. It gets a point off because I think the ending could have been a little bit better, but it doesn't ruin the thing for me. But I don't know, and it might go up on rewatches. I don't know. But yeah, no, I loved it.
Yeah, if I can say one more thing on that, though, the reason why I can still give this a 5, even with my issues with the ending, is because I'm still satisfied with where we leave all the characters. There isn't any character where
Yeah,
it's
that's
like,
fair. Yeah.
well, it sucks that ended that way for them, and that's gonna suck rewatching it. Like, there's nothing in the finale that made me go, oh, well, that's gonna suck rewatching this, or ugh, like other shows that
Right.
have bad or worse or flawed finales where it's like, well, now that's going to be in the back of my head watching through this, and that's tainted a little.
Yeah.
Nothing like that in the finale that's going to taint rewatching this. So I give it props for that. I'm looking forward to rewatching.
So I'm gonna keep mine short and simple because you guys have kind of said everything that I had to say. Not that that's a bad thing by any means. This is haunting. I think it's a beautiful piece of art. And it's on a hill house. No, I think this is not Mike Flanagan's magnum opus, but I do think this is a masterpiece on the level of his other Netflix shows that I have seen, and something like Doctor Sleep. And I'm glad you gave it a 5 out of 5. Thank you guys for watching. If you've watched all the way to the end of this mammoth of a video, we will have one or more of these when we do Midnight Mass, because that's about the same length. It's a couple hours shorter because that's only 8 episodes. But we will be doing